Good morning. I will convene this Tuesday, November 7th, 2017, regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Good morning and welcome to Harris Hall. Kind of quiet out there this morning. It's going to be a great day. We do have a 9 o'clock time certain from our health department, but we will cover public comments prior to that with no objection from the 9 o'clock time certain staff. So the first item on the agenda then today is adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Mokrahajski, do we have any adjustments?
We don't have any that I'm aware of.
Very well. To the board, adjustments to the agenda? None? Then on public comments, speakers will be taken in the order in which they sign up and will be limited to 3 minutes per comment. Please state your name and address for the purposes of the record prior to speaking. At the end of 3 minutes, you'll hear a signal. That signal is an opportunity for you to sum up your statement. I don't have a hard, fast 3 minutes on this. I'll let you finish your statement. But be aware sometimes there are people following you, and today we do have a 9 o'clock time certain that's being delayed just a little bit in order to complete public comments. Do I have public comments?
Yeah, someone's got to bring the sign up.
I wonder if somebody from staff could do that. Thank you. While I'm receiving public comments listing, we also have a public hearing today, which is on the ordinance that we will be considering this morning, which is Ordinance 1705. So I have 3 people signed up for public comment today. The first is Mr. Smejki, Robert Smejki, and if that's an incorrect pronunciation, please correct me. And please step to the mic and state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes.
My name is Robert A. Smackle. I'm an attorney. My address is 800 Willamette Street, Suite 800, Eugene, Oregon, 97401. Permission to deliver a memo to the chair and to the commissioners?
Please. Thank you.
I'm speaking regarding property located at 38534 Dexter Road, Dexter, Oregon, and it relates to a request that the landowner be allowed to redeem that property. The property is industrial property. It consists of 20.71 acres located in Dexter, Oregon. The matter at issue involves the application of Lane Code 21-425-4C, and the issue there is whether or not the record owner suffered from a mental or physical incapacity or inability during the foreclosure and redemption period, and whether satisfactory evidence can be presented to the Board of Commissioners in support of that. So the history is that this property was purchased in 2006 by the Peterson Family Trust, or excuse me, Peterson Family Bypass Trust, and for $800,000 in cash. The property was then transferred when Francis Peterson passed away. It was transferred to James Peterson Jr. in 2015. He is the vested owner. He is the party that did not redeem the property during the foreclosure period or during the redemption period, and the property that has the health issues. The matter at issue is I have presented to Mr. Tapia 230 pages of medical records from McKenzie-Willamette Hospital, Sacred Heart Hospital. They detail 4 separate hospitalizations of anywhere from 3 days to 7 days. He is in extremely poor health. He weighs over 400 pounds. He's on oxygen 24/7. He's confined for the most part to his home. He has home health care that serves him. And these conditions, which are detailed more specifically in these records that I've summarized, are relating to his weight, relating to edema, and there's also a condition that relates to his memory and cognitive function that relates to his ammonia levels. I have spared you the 230 pages of medical reports and just provided you with the summaries, the discharge summaries from the 4 hospital visits, but there were a total of 23 office and hospital visits during the 2-year period that I've outlined. Exhibit 3 to my submittal is the document that identifies the days that he was either in a hospital visit or admitted to the hospital from June of 2015 until September of 2017 before the deed was issued to Lane County.
Mr. Smeshka, I'm sorry, the alarm sounded very faintly, but please continue.
Very well.
Please finish your statement.
Okay. I just urge you to allow us to have a further hearing in order to consider this matter before the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mike McFadden, followed by Kevin Matthews.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Mike McFadden. I live in Eugene, Oregon. And so I think that both here locally and around the country, over the years, it's become more and more evident that there's a really glaring sort of political issue that we're all facing where ostensibly, all constituents, all citizens are equal, but some have become more equal than others. And, that manifests itself in all sorts of ways, which I don't really have time to get into now. But a few weeks ago, there was a presentation and the board was sort of considering some of the ways in which certain individuals face disparities in accessing care. And so to just continue on that thought in light of, what time of year it is and, pardon me, I have a cold, continuing that discussion a little bit, one of the groups that occurred to me that is really underserved is the veteran population. And so I would like to spend a moment talking about Project Alma, Camp Alma, which is going on out on Siuslaw River Road. That's a project of Veterans Legacy Oregon. The Board of Commissioners, engaged in a lease with this group so that they could rehabilitate the Forest Work Camp into a service center for veterans in Lane County. And so on a positive note, I really believe that Lane County just generally has an opportunity to become a sort of leader in the field of serving the needs of the common person, not just those special interests who may, be a really good source of political funding. But I think Camp Alma demonstrates a really great way to serve the veterans of Lane County, but beyond that, just provide an example nationwide that hopefully can be taken up and propagated elsewhere. As you've heard me talk about before, I really believe agriculture is a transformative force in a person's life, and getting to participate in farming is a really positive way to develop people and their skills. And so I really wanted to thank Chair Farr in particular and Commissioner Sorensen for their support of Camp Alma and Veterans Legacy Oregon. And I'd like to invite the public to look into them and learn more about what their mission is, including the other members of the board if they haven't already, and to look for other ways that you can extend help towards organizations like Veterans Legacy Oregon, in particular looking for county resources such as vacant lands that might be used by nonprofit groups to produce storage food crops for the needy and other organizations. I could see it being feasible in the future for the Lane County jail to provide a lot of its own food supply. And so I think that this county has a really great potential to lead the way in self-sufficiency and respecting the interests of the common person. So thank you.
Good timing, Ms. McFadden. Thank you. The final person we have signed up today is Kevin Matthews.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Kevin Matthews. I'm a candidate for East Lane County Commissioner. My wife and I are working to preserve an endangered breed of horses on our farm in Dexter at the end of Brown Road. I have a statement here that I released over the weekend and sent to you gentlemen on Monday morning. I know you're busy, haven't had a chance to respond to me yet. I hope it's something we can all agree on. So it was released as a written statement, so I'll just read it now. Violent attacks on nonviolent protesters, as apparently occurred in October up the McKenzie River watershed in East Lane County, are a sickening and despicable turn in the recent history of timber protest and timber operations in Western Oregon. Cascadia Forest Defenders has documented this abuse. As a dangerous violation of core rights and principles, it must be addressed. In the past, Remote enterprises across the West sometimes took up violence to break unions, quell protests, take land, and force outcomes. Such violence has been more rare in our region in recent decades and should not be allowed to reemerge or be condoned today. Rejecting violence against nonviolent protesters is not a question of agreeing with the protesters' cause. Whether one agrees or disagrees with the political position or the civil disobedience tactics of environmental protesters on public land, we should be able to agree as Americans on their right to protest nonviolently without being physically assaulted or being put at violent risk of life and limb. Uncalled for and illegal violence at the Goose Timber Sale must not be swept under the rug. As a Lane County community leader, I call on you, Lane County Commissioners, the Seneca Jones Timber Company, and other timber industry leaders to speak up and renounce such basic violations of industrial safety and human rights. Please stand with me to reject violence in Lane County politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. I received that at 8:09 this morning. Mr. Matthews was the last person we have signed up this morning. If anyone else wishes to address the Board of County Commissioners, please step forward at this time. I see none. We'll move along. On our agenda right now, Mr. Mokrahajski, is Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues or remonstrances. With the indulgence of the 9 a.m. time certain, we can continue with this. And just remember, we do have a time certain that is being delayed by permission of the participants. So, Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues and remonstrances. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is going to be directed toward Andy Clark, Legal Counsel. And so, the comments this morning from Mr. Schmeckel. And I know that it sounds like that there has been something already dropped off to Mr. Tapia in the legal counsel. Can you check to see if this may be potentially an executive session item to discuss? Because what he's asking for here is, in a sense, for the board to declare someone not able to handle something here. And so I don't know what our role is or what it should be, and so if you could double check on that would be appreciated, because reading through this, just glancing through it, because I really haven't had a chance to see it until now, it sounds like he's asking the board to do something here that I've never participated before. So that's my comment.
I don't have any firsthand knowledge of the matter. I did get from Sebastian just this morning that I think it's on the exec session agenda.
Okay.
Matter.
All right. Good.
So you'll have I'll mention it to him, and he'll probably address it at exec session.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. Further remonstrances or response? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Farr. I'd like to thank the gentleman for his concern about veteran services, and particularly at the Alma Work Camp. I know there are several of us here that are quite familiar with that facility going back to when it was first opened many years ago, and as a work camp, and subsequently closed down. I had the pleasure this summer of going out to the dedication ceremony to witness the reopening of that camp for veteran services. I'd like to commend Captain Dan Buchwald of the Lane County Sheriff's Office for taking a substantial lead in advancing this cause. I think it's a very noble effort. I hope that it is well supported. I'm a father of 2 combat veterans, and appreciate the good work that is done for our men and women who have served. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Further remonstrances or response? Commissioner Smith.
I just wanted to say that I thought that it was great that you came today to talk about the Alma camp and the work that's being done by the veterans group that is working toward that goal. And on the topic of food that's grown for county jails, a few years ago I looked into this topic, and San Francisco is providing the inmates at the San Francisco County Jail are growing the food for the jail. And apparently it's a very high percentage of the food. Of course, they have a pretty temperate climate there, maybe more temperate even than ours. I don't know how much land is involved, but I do know that that's been one of the positive outcomes of their effort to try to get the sheriff employees to provide the necessary safety for the neighbors and for the inmates and for the jail staff, but also to have the inmates have the time and the equipment and the guidance to grow their own food. And I don't know if it would work here or not, but I, at one point, spoke to the then sheriff about it. We haven't done it, so I think it's an opportunity. And maybe if it's shown that it will work at Alma, maybe it'll work, in town near the Lane County Jail. So thank you for coming and pointing out that this veterans group is really moving ahead with their plans.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Further responses or other issues? Seeing none, I'll just add a couple myself. Mr. McFadden, thank you for your mention of Veterans Legacy. I was going to talk about Veterans Legacy briefly this morning myself, and at some point, Mr. Mokrahewski, I may ask for a presentation on the progress that's being made on county land out at Alma. There's a history of growing lots and lots of food out there. Prior to the dismantling of the forest work camp, they had large greenhouses out there, and they grew a lot of food. Those greenhouses, when I was the executive director of Food for Lane County, the county gave those greenhouses to Food for Lane County. They're still being used out of our grassroots garden out on Coburg Road, used very extensively. But the history of growing food out there, you have a long day of sunshine out there in the summer, and relatively long summers, so options are wonderful. Veterans Legacy is moving forward with lots and lots of different plans, including equine farming, which is going to be pretty interesting, using horses, and which is great therapy for the people who work with the horses also. But significantly, yesterday, I had a chance to go to Clackamas County, to Oregon City. One of the reasons I was there was to go to a service for one of the remaining members of the family who sponsored our immigration to the United States back in 1965. So Gary Spencer passed away last week, and went to a service for him, and other members of the family were there. That was wonderful to see the folks who were responsible for allowing us to come to this country back in '65. But I also spent quite a bit of time at Clackamas, the county seat, and at the county seat they're building veterans residential pods, veterans quarters pods that are about less than 100 square feet. They're more like 65 square feet, not unlike our Conestogas, but they're hard-shelled, hard-walled, and insulated. They've built about a dozen of them so far, and Commissioner Savas, Paul Savas, thank you. I always say Savas. He gives Lane County the credit for their idea of doing that. And while the seed did occur in Lane County, what they're doing is really groundbreaking. And Veterans Legacy has an opportunity to actually potentially build some of the pods out there and use them themselves. Lots of things moving forward, lots of opportunities for veterans to use skills, learn skills, and grow skills. So thank you very much for your testimony regarding Veterans Legacy this morning, Mr. McFadden. The only other thing I'm going to say is I'm going to put this sticker on right now. It says I voted. And if you all haven't, 5 o'clock, what time today is it, Mr. Commissioner Williams? 7 o'clock this evening? If you don't vote by 7, you've missed it. And
if I could just say, I'm not wearing a sticker because there was nothing to vote on in my area. I didn't receive a ballot. Just so you know.
So thank you very much, and thank you for your indulgence in moving forward with the public comments and response. Mr. Mokrahewski or Mr. Clark, any emergency business? I see none.
And that I'm aware of.
Then we'll step back to item 5A, which is a second reading and public hearing on Ordinance 1705 in the matter of amending Lane County Code Chapter 9 to designate smoke and tobacco-free facilities and grounds. And today we have Mr. McGrath, we have Ms. Gaffney, and Dr. Warren.
I had some things I was going to say, but Ms. Gaffney is going to say all those, and I'm sure she'll do a more effective job than I would have otherwise done. And so I'll just say, Mr. Chair, that this the county has spent several years working on developing a campus-free policy, and so you're going to hear a lot of history about the work that's happened. You're going to hear about what our partners in the health community and here in Lane County are doing, and you're going to hear about our commitments to move forward in this direction that are consistent with state grants and other policies and priorities that have been adopted here by the board. So with that, I'll turn over to Ms. Gaffney.
And Ms. Gaffney, we are considering potentially a passage of Ordinance 1705 today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Farr and Commissioners. The County Administrator was very gracious in his introduction. I'll let him clean up in case there's anything that we don't cover. We do have a presentation for you this morning prior to the public hearing, and of course we're happy to answer questions at any point as we move forward. I did want to start with some of the background because this meeting today really is the culmination of years of discussion and work with the board on this particular topic and really our overall strategies to reduce tobacco use in Lane County. We started our focus on reducing tobacco use as part of our first community health improvement plan, and tobacco remains the largest preventable cause of death and illness in our communities. That's why it's an important focus for us and for our community partners who are concerned about health in the community. That first CHIP was widely adopted and supported in particular by our key partners in that work, Peace Health, and the hospital and the medical system as well, Trillium Community Health Plans, and United Way. So that really set the tone for the focus in improving health in our community. And we've been working on this particular policy for more than 3 years now, starting with a countywide committee that was formed to survey our staff, learn about what other similar organizations were doing, including what now are 10 other counties in Oregon who have adopted this policy, and use that information to inform our work moving forward. So I want to talk a little bit about why organizations adopt a tobacco-free campus policy. As we've talked in the past, the state of Oregon under Governor Kitzhaber adopted this policy, and now we have 10 counties that have followed suit. And as I said in my opening, tobacco use remains the single greatest preventable determinant of disease, death, and disability. So there is no single strategy that will effectively reduce tobacco use. And when you sit as the Board of Health, we talk about really a suite of policies to enact, to implement that use level. Tobacco-free campuses support a culture of health and cessation efforts by employees and by members of the public. So that has led to many of our organizations adopting that policy. Additionally, tobacco-free workplace policies are associated with lower smoking initiation by adolescents in particular, and I know that's been a strategy that's of particular interest to the board through these discussions. And then finally, I would add, and I know this is in your written packet as well, that the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health also recommends that employers establish and maintain entirely tobacco-free campuses. So that's some of the frame about why these policies are adopted. Particularly here in Lane County, as I mentioned, we have a community health improvement plan. We're now on version 2.0 of that particular plan, but we partner with not only the 3 organizations I mentioned, but really a broad part of the community to address what are the priority areas where we can improve health. And a particular part of our current community health improvement plan also targets specifically increasing the number of policies that promote smoke and tobacco-free environments and address the main drivers of tobacco use. So this policy is in alignment with our current CHIP as well. Our CHIP partners, Trillium, Peace Health, and United Way, understand the value and importance of promoting and providing those healthy environments. All three of them have preceded us in adopting tobacco-free campus policies. So in that way, we are the fourth and final piece in that puzzle of having a policy adopted across all of the CHIP partners. And this work would really allow us to continue to lead by example in the community as we promote those policies with other organizations. Would also be remiss if I didn't point out that as a recipient of public health grant funds from the state, the Oregon Health Authority is requiring us to have a tobacco-free campus policy or a plan in place to achieve that in order to receive some of their grants, specifically those grants that are focused around tobacco prevention work. Our current public health grants funded through the Oregon Health Authority that are impacted total over $500,000. And I think that's in your packet as well and an important consideration for us moving forward. Then I would say that in addition to our CHIP partners, there are more than 30 local businesses, agencies, and organizations in Lane County that have implemented tobacco-free campus policies. Includes the State of Oregon, City of Cottage Grove, the University of Oregon, Lane Community College, Hacksaw, Fifth Street Market, and our K through 12 schools. So we really are in good company in our community in looking at this particular policy. And then finally, I mentioned before, we have 10 other counties in Oregon that have moved ahead before us, and I think we can learn some lessons from their work as well. So I want to talk about the specific policy that's before you today. The tobacco-free campus policies typically prohibit all tobacco use and smoking on county-owned properties, indoor and outdoor, and apply to the general public as well as employees. Here in Lane County, during the last 2 years that we had a staff committee work on a draft policy for the county administrator's consideration, we really looked at a variety of policies from across Oregon and other communities to distill what was most important for us. The committee conducted a staff survey, examined best practices from across the country, and learned about the experience in health and human services where all of our campuses currently are tobacco-free. Ultimately, and I know we've said this in prior discussions, but it bears repeating, ultimately any final policy will need to be bargained with the unions prior to implementation in terms of addressing impacts. So if you choose to adopt the policy today and move forward, and I'll talk about that at the end, it really triggers a series of next steps that would happen prior to implementation. And really a successful rollout for these policies includes good communication, promotion of cessation resources for people, staff training, and signage. For the most part, jurisdictions across the country and certainly in Oregon treat these policies as self-enforcing. So we wouldn't anticipate citations being written for anyone who's smoking in an area where that's prohibited. Instead, the focus really is on having a clear expectation set by policy, good signage, and good communication about that. And that's what's been successful in other communities. So let's look at the exact language, and I know you have this in your packet as well, but we put it on a slide for anyone who might be watching the meeting. Several months ago, the county administrator convened an internal staff team to review this particular issue and potential policy language. The group included the county administrator, county council, labor relations, the assessor, public works, and myself representing health and human services to really have a thorough discussion prior to bringing an item to the board for consideration. The proposal from that group was to have the board adopt a brief policy statement in Lane Manual, which now has become Lane Code as this discussion has moved forward, and then for the administrator to adopt a more detailed administrative procedures manual section that talks about implementation of that. So that remains our recommendation. The policy in front of you is fairly brief, and then we would expect more detail to come out in the APM. This language before you is the draft that the internal team discussed for inclusion, and And the first, I guess the other piece I would remind the board as you look at this is that you have already adopted an ordinance that makes parks tobacco-free. So, so that policy is in place prior to this, where you set up the possibility for some potential smoking campsites. That's contemplated in this policy. It allows for an exemption as required by law, which, as you remember, we had some conversations around parks, around tribal use that's required, a required exception. So that's contemplated here, as well as the exception that you created for the possibility of campsites. So this is the language that we've drafted for your consideration and that you heard at first reading. And our move going forward, I have one more slide on next steps, and then I'm happy to answer questions, as is Jocelyn. So we did outline 3 next steps. As I mentioned earlier, if the lane code language, I'm sorry about the typo in the slide, lane code is adopted, then the county administrator would draft related APM language. Labor relations staff would need to bargain the impacts of the policy with the bargaining units, and then staff would initiate internal and external communications that would sequence with all of those pieces. Again, really, the goal of the policy is to be able to clearly communicate to staff and the public around the expectations on county properties. And for it to be successful, we really need to have that solid communication plan. We have, I think I mentioned at first reading, the county administrator and I did have a brief conversation with the presiding judge. I know we were asked about that, and I want to make sure I mention that piece. I think his concerns are some that I've heard shared from the board about how do we make sure that the public who are coming here to conduct county business are informed about the policy, and how can we address those concerns. We did, in talking with the judge and the court administrator, they were reaching out to courts in other counties that have already adopted this policy to get information specifically about, for instance, what they issue in jury instructions, the packet that goes out ahead of time to make sure people know what to expect when they come to court, and provide that communication piece. Overall, I think in a lot of ways we're lucky because others have traveled this road before us. I think we don't have to create responses or answers to a lot of those questions, that we really can build on what other communities have already decided. So I think I will stop there and ask if there are questions for staff.
Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. Before I go into questions, I'll mention that you talked about lane manual versus lane code. To change things in lane code, an ordinance is required. To change things in lane manual, simply action by the board is required. And then there's a third document we live by, which is the lane charter, which involves a much deeper public process. We're in the middle of the 3 types of documents. So, discussion to the presentation so far. Commissioner Sorensen.
So I know that you had the previous slide, or maybe before that, had the discussion of what wasn't included, and I think it's the next slide.
Road line?
Yeah, and county roads, right-of-ways were not included. The campground rules as they currently exist are included. Fairgrounds?
This language, yes, would apply to all county-owned properties, including the fairgrounds.
Let's see. Any other exceptions besides the roads and the modification on the campgrounds?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Sorensen, when we drafted this, we really based it on the language that other communities have used, and so those exceptions aren't in our policy.
Okay.
I mean, certainly, you know, at this point it becomes your policy, so if you wanted to craft exceptions, but our recommendation based on the data we have from other communities is to have an overall prohibition.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Further questions or comments?
If I
see, Mr. Clark.
real quick in response to Commissioner Sorensen's questioning, line 2, and I think Karen referred to this in her presentation, but the second line of the proposed code does say except as otherwise allowed by law, which gets to the issues of travel use or those sorts of things. So just, I don't know if that's quite an exception, but it affects the relevance and where it applies.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Clark. I do have a couple of quick questions. On the first bullet point on the previous slide, we talked about properties that are owned and operated by Lane County, and I see the word "and" in there, so it has to be owned and operated. So, for instance, if we're leasing property, it's not being operated by Lane County, so that wouldn't include leased property.
So, and I'm going to, when I look at the code language, I believe when I did this slide, I didn't intend it to be that it needs to be both of those things. Instead, it's properties that are owned and properties that are operated. I'm looking, if you go to this, I'm sorry, Jocelyn, go to the code language itself. My sense, and I'm going to yield to County Council on that, is that it would be, as I look at number 2, on all outside property or grounds owned or occupied by Lane County. So it would be either of those things. It does not mean it's both of those things.
So, for example, across the street, we have the, what sometimes is called the market blocks that are currently under lease to operator. So it would include the market blocks. We also have the Alma former forest work camp that is being leased. It would include the Alma forest work camp also.
Is that how that would?
Yeah, I'm not, we were just talking about that. I'm not real familiar with what's happening at the forest work camp in terms of ownership, leasing, who's operating. But a lot of instances, if the county is leasing property and doing anything on it, it's operating it, I think, quote unquote.
Yeah.
As far as the park blocks go, I'm not sure.
That was just an adjunct for me. It was the Alma property I was more asking about, actually, because that one is being actively operated by a separate agency. Okay. And I'd have asked you that before today, but I only thought of it today. So, very good. Then the other thing is, does this include Austin Stadium and airplanes? Oh, wait. That's already been done, hasn't it? Never mind. Then for the folks who may be watching online or in the audience, the entire language of 9.78, Lane Code 9.78, is available online. The entire insertion as a new segment that's being inserted into Lane Code, which is 9.78. Further questions? Then Ms. Gaffney, Dr. Warren, further presentation? Well, then we have before us an ordinance. Pardon me 1 second. I hadn't expected to get back there that quickly. It's ordinance 1705, which is a second reading and public hearing. Before I open the public hearing, this is in the matter of amending Lane County Code Chapter 9 to designate smoke and tobacco-free facilities and grounds. And the language to be inserted through this ordinance is available online. It's 9.78 of Lane Code. Then I will open the public hearing and ask staff if we do have anyone signed up for the public hearing. Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. We do have one person signed up for the public hearing. That is Kevin Matthews. Mr. Matthews, you'll be allowed 3 minutes. At the end of 3 minutes, you will hear an alarm, which will signal the 3 minutes are up. At that point, please complete your statement, complete your sentence. Please state your name and address for the purpose of the record.
Thank you, Chair Farr. Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Kevin Matthews. I'm a candidate for East Lane County Commissioner. My wife and I are working to preserve a rare breed of horses at our farm in Dexter. I just briefly want to thank you in advance for moving forward with an important public health measure. I'm sure we all regret the inconvenience this will cause to some individuals, but it will contribute to the health of everyone in the community, and it's an important contemporary measure as several other counties in Oregon have already implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. If anyone else in the audience would like to address the Board of County Commissioners, we're not the Board of Health in this, we are the Board of County Commissioners during this public hearing, please step forward. I see none. Then I will close the public hearing. Thank you. Further presentation?
We do not, Commissioner, have any presentation, but happy to answer any questions.
Very well. Further questions from the board? I see none. Then we will be moving forward with an ordinance. And Mr. Makarajewski, this is an ordinance. It's ordinance 705 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 9 to designate smoke and tobacco-free facilities and grounds. Commissioner Bozievich, I'm sorry, do I have a motion? Commissioner Lycan.
I'll make the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I move approval of ordinance 1705, the matter of amending Lane County Code Chapter 9 to designate smoke and tobacco-free facilities and grounds.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Lycan, seconded by Commissioner Williams, ordinance 1705. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as folks know, that there have been times when I've opposed the idea of smoke-free in some areas, and part of it is based on consistency. But this one, to me, makes sense because this is actually within our jurisdiction and within our body as far as Lane County is concerned. I think it makes sense from that perspective because it's not so much including within the public aspect. And it's one of the reasons why I went back and forth on parks, because of the consistency with the state. But the state of Oregon actually has rules like this in place. We've seen other counties, which by the way includes Coos County, which I thought was pretty impressive in itself. So from that perspective, this is the reason why I'm going to support this. And I want to say thank you for the good work by Ms. Gaffney. You mentioned all the team involved, and it just wasn't public health, but all the team involved that really took a look at this to put something together like this. And while it could be an inconvenience for some, I believe it's the right thing to do. And as an elected official who has the responsibility here of whether it's ordinances or the case may be, I think it's important, and it sends a good positive message. And by the way, it's on the heels, I think, of that incredible award that Lane County received, and I think it goes right in hand along with the CHIP and really with our strategic plan that we have in place. So I appreciate the good work, and I'm prepared to support this.
Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. Further discussion? Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. I support a lot of efforts towards reducing use of tobacco. I won't be able to support this one. It was almost 6 years ago in the formation of CHIP 1.0 that I suggested the idea of raising the age of tobacco use in Lane County to 21, which later got picked up as a term called Tobacco 21 and finally came to realization this year. But I don't feel this is one of the most effective ways of preventing tobacco use, and I feel it's adding a barrier to access of county services and for redress of government to those that are addicted to a legal product in our country. And we talk constantly about lowering barriers. We're talking about supported housing with low barriers to the housing. This, to me, is adding a barrier to services, and I just can't support it for minimal gain in public health benefits. So I will be voting no on the ordinance.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. Further discussion? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've stated before in previous discussions on this topic the personal tragedies that virtually everybody in this room and probably everybody watching has known the catastrophic illnesses caused by tobacco by a loved one, a friend. There's no shortage of damage done by the use of tobacco. I buried my own father in his mid-40s. Contributing factor to his early demise was tobacco use. A year or so ago, one of my very closest friends succumbed to various forms of cancers directly attributed to smoking. This is a scourge. This is an opportunity for us to have some impact in relation to this. it is, in my view, our duty to do whatever it is that we can do to facilitate in the cessation of tobacco use. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Further discussion? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be voting for this. As was mentioned, there's a lot of stories about people's family members dying and the amount of tragedy that is families have to suffer through because of tobacco use and addiction. You know, the tobacco industry has spent literally billions of dollars on advertising and promotion of its products, and there's an effort in the United States to try to minimize the impact of all of that advertising, but a lot of that's being transferred to other countries, and the marketing and that's out there is just seems to be continuing. And I don't know what else we can do besides try to put on policies and ordinances and practices that try to help people get out of tobacco addiction, try to model for children that this isn't the best way to live. And this ordinance does a lot of that within our jurisdiction, within our power. I'm glad we're doing that. Too bad we can't do more. So I'll be voting yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Further discussion? Then I'll add a couple of things. You know, my thousands and thousands of words about this have already been spoken. A couple are worth reiteration. You know, my children lost 75% of their grandparents to cigarettes, and we're not the only family. That's about it that I'm going to say about that. But the other thing I'll notice, with tongue-in-cheek a little bit, is this must be the fourth quarter of my chairmanship, because every time we get to that point in my chairmanship, we start with tobacco ordinances. 3 years ago, we made some significant strides. So I'll be pleased to place my name, the signature at the bottom of this ordinance, should it pass today. Thank you for the hard work to you and your staff to get us to this point, and thank you for the generations to come who will benefit from the action that we potentially are going to be taking today, should we take the action today. It's a huge step. It is an imposition for some people. One of the great state senators from Coos Bay always talked about impact on low-income people regarding certain activities that they engage in, and cigarette smoking was one of them. However, that same senator is adamantly against cigarette smoking. So the other thing I'll say is that we do have laws, lots and lots of laws, many of which are not fully enforceable. Now, we'll think about those. If I run the stop sign out on Erickson Road, am I going to get stopped? Not very likely. But do I stop anyway? Yeah, I do. I do, because that's the law. And even though laws 100% aren't enforceable sometimes, as this is going to be a difficult one to enforce from a seat ahead to the top of the Three Sisters, and the county lands in between, the fact is that it is a law, and we presume that people read the law, understand the law, and to the best of the extent of their ability and the extent of their capability will obey the law. So it is with pride that I support this ordinance, and thank you for your hard work. It's a little bit of a shame that we're the 11th county to do it, but that being said, it seems to be a movement throughout the state and throughout the nation. So thank you for the discussion regarding this ordinance, Mr. Mokrzycki. We do have before us ordinance 1705. This is an ordinance, so we'll require a roll call vote.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Bozevich?
Nay.
Commissioner Lyken?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Farr?
Aye. Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozevich in opposition. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. And Chair Farr and Commissioners, I just want to take a moment to really thank you for the tremendous work you've done on all of the different tobacco initiatives. Sitting as the Board of Health and as the Board of Commissioners, it really has been tremendous, the leadership that you've provided not only here in our community, but statewide on the tobacco policy work that you've done. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. I mentioned your staff. A large number of people worked on this, and I want to particularly point out Christy Inskip, who visited me years ago in my office and talked to me about questions that I had regarding enforcing anti-smoking laws. So your staff has been stellar throughout this entire process. Thank you. We have a 10 a.m. time certain, so we do have a few moments between now and then. So a couple of things we did skip. Actually, we didn't skip anything yet. We're still on track to do our consent calendar, which is item 6 on the agenda. So our consent calendar will be enacted in one motion. No separate discussion of the items. If discussion had been desired, we would have pulled it from the consent calendar in order to have discussion. So we have before us the November 7th, 2017 consent calendar. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Bozevich.
I'll move approval of the November 7th, 2017 consent calendar.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozevich, seconded by Commissioner Lycan. Do I have discussion to the motion? The entire consent calendar is available online, including the details of the motions that are being passed. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Then County Council announcements. I see no County Council announcements. Ms. Smoker-Heisky, announcements.
Mr. Chair, I did think that I'm not sure if the County Council had announcements. I thought that there was a discussion that he was going to have. So if there's a moment for Mr. Dingle to pop down, that'd be great. And I can, until that time happens, I'm happy to share with you a couple.
Continue with 8A and delay 7A. 8A is County Administration announcements. Mr. Smoker-Heisky.
Mr. Chair, just an update on elections. I see we have some commissioners wearing their I voted stickers, which is great. Today, of course, is Election Day. Voter turnout is approximately 24%, which is 45,187 ballots returned out of approximately 188,000 eligible voters. This was as of yesterday. We will pick 3 times on Election Day from the 17 drop site locations. We'll pick up 3 times today from those 17 drop site locations at 8 a.m., 12:30 p.m., and 8 o'clock p.m. tonight. The first results will be released at 8 p.m. or shortly thereafter, and we'll continue to process all the ballots received until that's done tonight. The election will be certified no later than the statutory deadline of November 27th, 2017, and our total countywide voter registration as of today is 251,110 registered voters. That's all that I have, Mr. Chair, for now, unless you have questions of me.
Thanks, Ms. Smoker-Heisky. Then we'll step by item 7A. Mr. Dingle, we do have a 10 a.m. time certain, as you're aware, because it's your item. But 7A is
item, but yes.
County Council announcements.
Just one, I wanted to update the board. I know we've had discussions about the litigation involving the initiative and referendum process. And so I think I sent you all an email advising that the one aerial spraying measure had received and Ms. Betchart had verified the requisite number of signatures. So pursuant to Judge Rasmussen's order, we conducted a review for compliance with the separate vote requirement and concluded that it did not comply with that. So we're still waiting to see what the petitioners are going to do in response to that, but I did want to update the board.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Dingle. Commissioner Sorensen.
On the requirement for a single subject, is that what you mean by separate vote?
No.
Could you distinguish that for us?
Yes. Two different constitutional requirements. Single subject just means that the matters have to be sort of closely related. Separate vote means that probably the best way I can explain it is the way the Supreme Court upheld found that the death penalty measure complied with the separate vote requirement. Essentially, all the votes have to basically implement one idea.
All the yes votes, when the measure is passed, all of the yes votes.
A better example is of one that did not comply, which was the Crime Victims Bill of Rights, because you could have been in favor of victims speaking at sentencing, but not in favor of 11-to-1 verdicts for murder cases. So essentially, those all had to be.
It might have met the single subject. It has to do with crime victims. So that's the single subject rule. But it may not have complied with a measure. An initiative might not comply with a separate vote requirement.
Right. And actually, the crime victims measure, which is discussed in Armada versus Kitzhoffer, is a very good illustration of that. One subject, crime victims bill of rights, so it met the single subject requirement. However, it did not meet the separate vote requirement.
Now, are both required, do the elections officials, either Secretary of State, city recorders, county elections officials, do they have to make a determination that it meets both of these before it can go toward the voters? Or do they make that determination after there's something that the voters have approved?
Well, when it comes to, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about a state constitutional amendment or a state initiative measure, yes, the Secretary of State does that, both pre-circulation. You'll recall that was the whole issue in the Long versus Betchart matter, because what is involved in the aerial spraying initiative is a county charter amendment. And so, yes, Ms. Betchart, as we do on all measures, verified compliance with the single subject rule prior to circulating the petitions. And then Judge Rasmussen indicated that because of that one, I still think it's sort of an outlier statute, it didn't say when the review was to be done. So Judge Rasmussen indicated that the clerk was to review if and when the requisite number of signatures were verified. And that means it before it goes to the voters. And one of the things that we know from Armada, at least in the way the Oregon Supreme Court has interpreted it, is not the Secretary of State and the clerk are not responsible for fixing it. So in other words, when Armada was bad, when that measure was bad, you had to go back and recirculate the petitions in the proper form. In other words, the solution was not to say, well, these are to comply with the separate vote requirement, we're going to break all these things out. The court said, nope, you have to go back. And if you're around in those days, you remember there were people, they had to have a petition for 11-to-1 verdicts, victims speaking at sentencing. There was a separate sheet for each one of those.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Any further questions for Mr. Dingell under announcements?
I'll just note I'll probably bring this back up under agenda team request because I think there's a follow-up for the board on this item.
Excellent. Thank you. Be advised, Mr. Dingell, you may hear about that later. We are moving close to 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and change the room for our 10 o'clock time certain. And today, Mayor Joe Henry is with us in the audience. Mayor Henry, welcome to Harris Hall. And in a few moments, I may ask you to introduce your delegation who's attended with you, with the indulgence of the balance of the commission. Mr. Mokrzycki, we have before us a discussion on Revision Florence, and Mr. Dingell is our is staff today, and we may have a panel. I see Ms. Means in the audience and Ms. Moody in the audience. Mr. Mokrzycki.
Mr. Chair, I think what we'd like to do is invite the team from the City of Florence up to, I believe they have a presentation related to Revision Florence that they're going to present. So I'll give up my seat and invite three. Okay, come on up. And we'll have them get the presentation going. And then Mr. Dingell is prepared after that to have provide you information related to his legal analysis regarding the legal use of transient room tax funds. So we'll get into that topic after we hear from the City of Florence.
Thank you, Mr. Mokrzycki, and welcome to the panel, Mr. Mayor Henry. Welcome to the panel, Mr. Mayor Henry. Please have a seat. And at this point, could I ask you to introduce the members of your delegation?
Absolutely. Good morning, Chairman Farr and Commissioners. It's very pleasant to be here. With us today we have Joshua Green. He is the chair of our Urban Renewal Agency as well as a city councilor. Our city manager, Aaron Reynolds.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
We're back up here to answer all the hard questions. We have Megan Messmer, our project director, Andy Parks, our finance director, and Jeff Lang from ODOT. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Mayor Henry.
You want us to proceed?
Please proceed, yeah.
Okay, great. I'll give you a little bit of history about Florence, which you may or may not know. But 3 years ago, we elected a new city council and selected and hired a new city manager. Our community had sort of been in a holding pattern. I like to refer to it as hibernation for a number of years through the downturn in the economy. And of course, that's been recovering for a few years. But we reached an agreement early on, and we created a 5-point work plan, which has worked extremely well for us and has led our community toward becoming Oregon's premier coastal community, which is our goal. We established those 5 overreaching goals that support our city staff and council, and these are the things we work on every day. We've had some hitches along the way. Obviously, we don't all agree always, but when we refocus on this work plan, and we keep everything within that plan, it eliminates a lot of those problems. So we have a number of initiatives going in the city of Florence. The premier of those is our Revision Florence program that we're here to talk about today. I'm not going to get into too much of the nuts and bolts. As I mentioned, Councilor Joshua Green is the chair of our urban renewal, and he's been very instrumental in bringing this project along. Talk a little bit about project goals and overview. We've been working on Revision Florence for over 2 years. It's been a fairly comprehensive, it's a big project for us. It's $7.2 million, which may not sound like a lot when you look at Eugene or Lane County, but for us, it's quite a bit of money. We are currently at the 90% design milestone. This project will invest in the Highway 101 and 126 corridors to help beautify the area and make it more attractive to our guests. The project will promote tourism in our Main Street district. It'll improve safety and add public investment to promote new and private investment. And the city, we've budgeted for and we're committed to maintaining these improvements long term. Once Revision Florence is complete in early 2019, ODOT will follow with paving of this section of Highway 101, which I'm sure that all of you visit the coast, and we just commented this morning on the beautiful drive over there with the leaves turning color. Well, when you get into Florence and make a left on 101, that's a pretty ugly piece of road, and many people just continue on and head south or north. And this project, we hope, will encourage them to slow down, spend a little time, spend some money, and further contribute to our tourism dollars. The ODOT, we want to be specific in that the ODOT paving project is not part of our revision. It will occur at about the same time, so hopefully it will be seamless, but it's really not part of this project. So they're 2 separate projects. And I think this is an example of what can be done when agencies work together toward a common goal, even in rural areas such as Florence. I think that you've all seen our master plan. The goals of this project include highway beautification, safety, as mentioned prior. The main focus, though, is to present the best foot forward for Florence when people come in to Florence either from the south or from the east. So we want to put our best foot forward. And again, that's sort of what we're here asking you to help us with today. You're all familiar with, obviously, Lane County's priorities, and we believe Revision Florence ties directly in with your priorities. Revision Florence is about improving safety, creating a vibrant community, and improving the pedestrian infrastructure of this corridor, all of which bode well for tourism. And we believe that this project ties in well with your rural prosperity initiative in helping rural areas to succeed. It's adding $6 to $7 million in public investment that would otherwise be a requirement of private development, making it more difficult for us to develop that corridor. So as I mentioned earlier, Joshua Green, chair of our Urban Renewal District, has been instrumental in this development of this project. He's here to fill you in on some of the details. So Joshua.
Thank you, Mayor Joe. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. This is this is a project that's very near and dear to my heart. Having lived in Florence for 20 years, I've always asked myself, why is 101 so unfriendly? Why are the sidewalks so small? Why don't you get a way to get into Old Town where you can drive some more traffic to help with the area where all the tourists go and visit where the small shops are? The Bay Street area is very popular, but nothing coming back. So to tie this all together, this is one of the focuses of this program, and I will get into that in more detail. It's basically a revision of an entire mile and 2/10 from 126 to Quince, which is right where the FEC is, which is the back way into Old Town, out to 101, make a left and go all the way to the bridge. The bridge will be completely refinished as it's being restored now for 2 years. So the success of that. We also have the success of the roadie path that you helped us with, that the city worked on. That's now been completed going to 101. So all these elements around this project are getting worked on, just to give you some backstory. Anyway, our focus is on tourism. The key things that we've brought into this design is to have bicycle paths, have safe pedestrian capability, and have these plazas. We reconfigured the street in such a way where there's areas for people to sit and enjoy and be outside. We've also built public art throughout this area, both large and small, and I can talk about more of that. So we're really trying to create this design so that certain key areas might be ready for investment and redevelopment, whether it's hotels, businesses, mixed use, and the like. It makes 101 an attractive place for reconsideration for investment. We are the gateway to the Pacific Ocean, as you well know, and of course, we are your port and your access to the beaches. We hope that this project, by the way, the streets have never been touched for over just the pavement alone hasn't been done for 30 years, let alone the sidewalks that are in disarray. The project has become a case study on how local governments can coordinate with ODOT to develop highways and highway amenities, and Revision Florence will increase the potential for development of a large hotel in Florence. We also have architectural guidelines that have been put in place over the years that work very well and will marry this design of what we've done. So there's a harmony there now. So the idea of development should not be dysfunctional, it should be much easier, and the city has worked very hard to make the planning department more user-friendly to make these developments work for people. One of the great things about this, it's a gateway. This is a mock-up. You do see the squiggly lines there. They're actually going to be moss green and terracotta brown. Moss green as in the moss we see in the Oregon trees.
And only on the north side.
On the north side, right. And the idea is that this gateway will attract you down into Old Town, and the plaza that you see there sort of designed roughly, there's art, there's places for people to gather, there'll be benches and maybe a fountain or things like this. This is a mock-up, but the design of the area is the tourist attraction portion are these gateways and these plazas, and the idea that it's user-friendly, pedestrian-friendly, and bicycle-friendly. Those are key things, along with public art, which becomes a reason to come and see what we're doing in Florence. Let me see. So the gateway, okay, here we go.
You can keep talking about that.
Am I all right?
You're doing great.
Okay. I've gone off script if you haven't realized it. Florence is a largely tourism-based economy, and as it relates to the economics, we do get a lot of visitors who come through town. And we're doing everything we can to make it more interesting for people to come, especially on the off season in the wintertime. And there's programs that we're putting in place like Public Art to drive the traffic back to Florence. As you can see here, our city proper may only represent 2.35% of Lane County's residents, but we serve the regional hub of over 5% of the county's residents. Florence's annual transient room tax has grown consistently each year from 2010, with the exception of 2013, which was when Driftwood Shores was basically offline because of the storm damage. It lost almost a year. Per capita, Florence proper generates more transient room tax than any other city in Lane County. The generation of TRT does not include the Best Western Pier Point Inn, south of town, Lane County's Harbor Vista Campground, which you know so well, and the Honeyman State Park, south of town. All three of these, just outside the city limits, attract thousands of people and visitors to the Florence area, which also results in Lane County tax. Our per capita TRT is calculated at $333 per person based on the Florence population. So,
Sorry.
any questions?
I was just joking with Commissioner Lyken that Springfield's number 2.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Good job.
To complete my part of the presentation, we hope to be completed. We expect this is a shovel-ready project. The public art aspect is in place as part of the design. The Public Art Committee is going to be working on finding additional funding for the purchase of the art itself. It's also part of the Art Exposed program, which is a outdoor 2-year gallery environment, if you will. So the pedestals will be put in place. The art will be on loan for 2 years and will be available for sale. And the larger pieces, of which there will be 6, will be done a call to artists where we'll get artists to be brought in through the Public Art Committee to put those in place. As you're coming into town, on the right-hand side, the back of what is the public PUD building, there is a substantially large wall, and that has been identified to be a mural. So as you're coming in from 126, before you even get to 101, there's a large mural, which of course will be beautiful. There'll be a gateway entrance with pedestals coming into Quint Street. Then you come on to 101, and this beautiful sidewalk and array with flowers and trees and landscaping and the new modern lighting, all that opens up and unveils to you, and then the 2 gateways that bring you back into Old Town. If that doesn't slow down traffic and entice people to say, hey, where am I? I don't think we can, because it's a big difference, and it will make a major difference, especially the way they're going to be decorated and lit. So we hope to attract hospitality developers, a national, international brand with a 100-room facility with 50% occupancy at $125. The average roommate can generate an additional $114,000 per year. Payback for TRT funding with the new revenue is outlined here as approximately 10 years with a single new facility. I think I've covered everything I need to say. So anything I've left out?
You can call it a boulevard if you want.
She's always letting me. I want to say that this is an opportunity for it to be a beautiful, wide boulevard, like you see in proper cities, where the sidewalks are enticing and you feel safe walking on them. Bicycle lanes. There'll be some parking in certain places, and the idea really is to make people stop and take notice of this effort that we've put into our community. That's the exciting turnaround. And I think I've covered everything I'm supposed to.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
To emphasize that point that Joshua made, our Old Town District is a tourism generator, engine, but too many people drive by that don't even know what's down there. That gateway on the previous slide, we need a way to get them down there. So that's really what this project is about.
Thank you.
And so, next on the agenda is Erin Reynolds, our city manager.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having us here today. We appreciate your time. My part of the presentation is in response to some questions and things that have been brought up over since we've had our work session back in May. Thank you for coming and visiting us in Florence and spending some time over there earlier this year and talking about this project. We understand the use of transient room tax funds can be spent on tourism promotion or tourism-related facilities as defined by the Oregon Revised Statutes. Revision Florence has many elements that meet this definition of tourism-related facilities. Relevant to this project, a tourism-related facility is defined by the statute as other improved real property that has a useful life of 10 years or more and has a substantial purpose of supporting tourism and accommodating tourism activities. The project's gateway features, as we've shown some dreams and concepts to you, feature the public art, landscaping, streetscaping, street lighting elements that are all related to enhancing the tourism experience through Florence, which is our area's major economic driver. Supporting this project would provide tourism amenities in our region, which in turn will enhance our economy and your economy. The cost estimates of the elements outlined below and on the screen are provided in further detail. In the next two slides, we have some more graphical illustrations of that. So for the technical-minded, these are the elements of the project budget, the total $7.4 million budget that we believe strongly are qualifying for transient room tax dollar support. As you can see, there's over $3.2 million of items. There is detail here, 15 benches, 18 bicycle racks, 7 litter receptacles. That's a nice way of saying garbage cans. Concrete plazas, the gateway features, art plinths. I've learned a lot in this project. I've also learned what a plinth is. We call those pedestals or bases for art or other objects that you want to have on display. And landscaping. Yes, we learn something new every day. It's never boring. So here's a more graphical illustration of some of those items. We've had small successes over time and really seen community support for items that have come through partnerships with the city, the Chamber of Commerce, and just really involve citizens and businesses. We've been able to put up banners and flower baskets, and I can tell you the first question we always get is, why can't this be on 101? We want this on 101 too. Why can't we? And quite frankly, we just don't have the equipment and the foundation to be able to have those sort of amenities that people have come to really want to have in their town and to brag on their town. So each of these elements.
May I add one?
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing. That top right corner is not the actual lighting system that's going to be on 101. Ours is a little bit more, it's more contemporary, and it has 2 lights, one over the sidewalk, one over the street, and still allows for the banner. It's a little bit more contemporary, but really nice looking. And with the LED lights, it gives it that dramatic feeling at night. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Thanks for clarifying. These are concepts. We don't have an actual, we had to pick elements of different types of light fixtures in order to get the effect that we really wanted. We wanted to have that pedestrian lighting and the street lighting, which is illustrative of the fact that there's competitive needs on this corridor. It is supposed to still maintain a transportation route, but we also want to have that urbanized pedestrian fill as well. It will also have brackets for banners, and they will all be have electricity to them so that they can have lighting for the different holidays throughout the year, which is shown as an example of the little Christmas trees along the street lights down in that bottom right corner. We believe that these elements will welcome visitors along Highway 101 to Lane County and to Florence. Our design team has selected products and materials that are designed to last more than 10 years, and we have already made a commitment as a city and an urban renewal board in this biennial budget, and we plan to in our long-range financial plan to support the maintenance and upkeep of these items. Moving on, each of these elements have been designed to foster pedestrian interest and access to the 101 and 126 corridor, dramatically changing this area from just a transportation route into a welcoming gateway to Florence that will encourage visitors to pull off the highways and investigate what more Florence and Lane County has to offer. These elements will have an impact both to Florence residents and non-residents, including our tourists, and we just want to create that inviting environment to our visitors. Here you'll see an example of the pedestrian amenities furniture that has been selected by the Urban Renewal Board. As mentioned, we are 90% of the way through this project, so we're down to the point where we're picking colors and what these fixtures can look like and what we desire for this project. Here's an example of a close-up of the plaza that's going to be at Maple Street, Nopal Street, and Quint Street. They'll all bring in elements of the character of the area, calling to the Art Deco period of the bridge, and tying in the historic Old Town features and, of course, the river and the ocean, as demonstrated by the wavy river-like patterns for the plaza area. Councilor Green mentioned the terracotta red and the moss-colored green have been selected as colors to break up the existing cement and asphalt look of the area. And I think Councilor Green is bursting at the seams to probably say a little bit more about the plaza area. It's okay. Would you like to say some more? Go ahead.
Put me on the spot.
On the spot.
I mean, again, the plaza is a place for people to congregate and then go back and forth from Old Town, but also walk down the street, walking down the sidewalk, because now the sidewalk will be beautified in such a way where it has different stations of art all the way down around to the end, to the side of the plaza that brings you back to Quint Street. So we're doing, again, what Mayor Joe was talking about. We're trying to create traffic between 101, Old Town, and the FEC, Public Performing Arts Center, that will generate more small businesses that are on Bay Street. They don't do well when they're sitting back on 1st and 2nd Street. The public just doesn't know they're there. So we're trying to fill that in and create this incentive. It's one of the biggest complaints we have by residences and businesses, and the tourists don't know that they're there. So this is all part of that.
Fair warning, this is an Excel spreadsheet slide. So the total project budget, and this was also provided for you in your packet, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but it is a $7.4 million project. Not all elements of this qualify for transient room tax dollars, and we do have some dedicated funding already achieved through partnership and work with the state of Oregon through the Lane Act and the STIP funding, and then also the city of Florence and then urban renewal. And so as I mentioned, about $3.2 million of the total project qualify for what could be used from transient room tax. And this is in your packet for further information. And as we had discussed with you back in May, there was that encouragement from the board to make sure we left no stone unturned. And we truly have talked to everyone. We didn't call the governor. The governor actually came and visited. We had the state of Oregon's highest representative here in Florence, and it was a really fantastic day. And it was a great time to share what we have and what our dreams are for Florence.
I'm fairly sure Commissioner Bozovich called her. So.
Oh, probably.
She didn't say she'd help us with any money, but she said Lane County would be happy.
Yeah. But I really, this is a great photo that's representative of people from a wide variety of organizations, not only just in Lane County, but throughout the state of Oregon. And we just are thankful that Lane County has been able to be at the table or around the room or in our community so regularly. So, and that is represented in this picture as well. We had a couple of delegates from Lane County there. I think Sarah's like front and center of this photo. So yes. Good job, Sarah. So that that just is a way to show that we have asked, we have gotten quite a bit of financial support from other parties, and not only that, our business community and residents are supportive of this project. And then, as always been highlighted and is in the room today, having ODOT be a partner in this project and be able to dress up an amenity or make it an amenity to our city, as opposed to just a state and federal highway going through our town. So that concludes my presentation, and I think Mayor Henry's gonna take over from here.
Okay, thank you, Aaron and Councilor Green. I do need to mention also that Councilor Green is the chair or the liaison to our Public Art Committee. So he has a real passion and a vested interest. He's also an artist in his own right, has a very thriving business in our community. So I'm more of a spreadsheet kind of guy. So I'm not all those warm and fuzzy things like, what are they called? What was that thing?
Plinths?
Plinths, yeah, plinths and terracottas and those type of things kind of bounce off of me. I have no artistic bent at all. So this is the moment we've all been waiting for, so we'll have a drum roll in a minute. But first I want to, again, just reiterate that this is a $7.4 million project. 5.4 of that million of that is committed from ourselves and from other partners and sources. Keep in mind that Florence is Lane County's first it's Lane County's seaport. Most other counties have more than one, but you only have one. And it's also the gateway to not just to Florence, but to the Oregon coast, to the dunes, to all the other activities on the Oregon coast. And again, to mention that beautiful drive there, and then it kind of takes a downturn when you come into the city limits of Florence and down 101. And we really want to change that. So we believe that this is just an excellent opportunity for Lane County to help Florence move forward toward that goal of becoming Oregon's premier coastal community, because we are on that track, and we've been recognized by a number of entities for that. So without further ado and no drum roll, we are asking for $2 million from Lane County in project support. This includes $1.2 million over 6 years from transient room taxes. I think that graphic of the $333 per capita indicates to you just how valuable tourism in Florence is, and I believe this can help contribute to actually increasing that more over time. We'd like to have that $200,000 a year beginning January 1st of 2018 from TRT, lottery funds, or existing transportation funding sources. Another $0.8 million from the increased state revenue from the recently signed transportation package. And if we could, $200,000 per year for 4 years beginning in fiscal year 2019. So again, we thank you very much for allowing us to be here to make this presentation, and that we, again, ask for your help. So thank you very much.
Mayor Henry, Councilor Green, Ms. Reynolds, this is precisely the presentation that I believe we had invited. The details that you provided in the spreadsheets and in the bullet points, very well done. It makes it difficult for me to curb my enthusiasm for your city and for the project. But first, I'd like to, on a sad note, I acknowledge the passing of Wesley Voth, longtime member of the Siuslaw Watershed Council. I received news of that this morning. Mr. Voth worked hard for many, many years, and we will miss the contribution there. And one last thing before I open it to questions from Commissioner Bozievich and the balance of the board. Parking in downtown Florence, parking on the waterfront is good. Take that from me personally. I was down there more than two handsful of times this summer. Never had problem finding parking right along the waterfront. Helping me to visit, places like the Resto Bar and the Waterfront Depot and the other great stores. And there's a Kitchen Clutter, I believe, is the name of the place. I never fail to stop at Kitchen Clutter.
Oh, good to know.
This is a great presentation. Once again, makes it difficult for me to curb my enthusiasm. And at this point, we may have some questions for you. And thank you for being very specific about your request. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. And it is an exciting project. And as
I'm sorry, Commissioner Bozievich, there was one other thing I was going to ask for, and that's Mr. Mokrahski. Does Ms. Means, do you have anything that you need to add before we begin discussion? And Commissioner Bozievich. Sorry.
Oh, Mr. Chair, yeah, we did want to have Steve Dingle present to you the legal analysis. So when you're ready for that, that was one of the questions the board had. As a result of the discussion we had back in May, we visited Florence to do that presentation on the legal use of TRT funds. So if you want to do questions and comments for the city officials, that's great. And then Mr. Dingle can provide his comments after that.
Very good. Let's begin with Commissioner Bozievich, who's a commissioner from that district.
Yeah, and it's an exciting project, and I share Chair Farr's excitement about this project and the idea of beautifying that stretch of roadway, because it always has been a head scratcher for me since the first time I toured the coast in my first visit to Oregon in 1992. It just seemed like it was a little bit out of place compared to all the rest of the coast I went up and down, that it just kind of seemed a little bit more commercial and industrial looking from the highway. And it's really not the true character of Florence. What's presented from the highway doesn't match the rest of town. Mm-hmm. And that mismatch has always been an issue for Florence in inviting people in. So I really appreciate the work that the Urban Renewal Committee has done and working towards this end project that's really all about getting people to stop and spend some time in Florence and appreciating what Old Town really is and just how wonderful it is. It seems like I'm always either at one end or the other of Old Town. Coffee roasters or the Bridgeport Market. It seems like I end up at one of those two places almost every time I'm down there, which just lends to my caffeine addiction or my addiction for Cuban sandwiches. But it's just, when you're down in Old Town, it's a remarkable, experience being down there and looking up at that wonderful Art Deco bridge from down there and the dune across behind the bridge and the pilings and everything else and salmon fishermen working the river. It's something but when you're up on 101, you can zip right through there and never realize how beautiful that is down there. So getting people to get down there and see that and maybe stop and spend some time is really important. I don't know if I have any specific questions about the project other than, I saw that great picture of the plazas there. Are you guys planning on sea lions involved in your plaza too? Because I can just imagine a lot of little kids playing on those sea lions over the years.
Oh, yeah. That is not exactly part of the plan, but the idea of the colors, if you see the terracotta on the right and the green on the left, that's what that's really illustrating. Yeah. However, we know sea lions are a favorite, and one of the things we're learning about public art is if it's going to be out in public, it has to be safe. So obviously these would be safe because they're on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's also another thing. When you're on a 107-foot wide thoroughfare, the art you can't see it when you're driving by. So you want it to be more vertical in a way where it stops you and you see it.
Yeah.
Hence the reason why we did the sea lions up higher on a post.
And from our Dancing with the Sea Lions project that there are about 30 sea lions around town, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that at least one might not end up in there somewhere.
Yep. And I'll just make quick note, your color selection's great. Being a very big fan of the arts and crafts era and craftsman homes and Art Deco, those are the correct colors actually for that era. So it goes right in with the bridge and all that, but I'm sure you knew that probably better than I did.
No, it was a decision made by the entire Urban Renewal Board. And if we did go into different types of colors, and I organically feel that everybody came to that decision.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. Mr. Dingle, I'll call you in a moment, but first, Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, question I have is, have you made a presentation to Travel Lane County?
We actually have not made a direct presentation to Travel Lane County.
I would highly suggest that.
Okay.
And the reason why is because Travel Lane County is well connected with Travel Oregon. But even beyond that, the president and CEO, Carrie Westland, is well connected to the national tourism organizations, and she's very well connected to that. Yesterday was our first kind of organized meeting that we truly had with Tracktown
Okay.
and talking about the World Track and Field Games. And Florence was mentioned, I will tell you, more than once. Because as we're looking at different things to showcase here in Lane County, Florence was clearly mentioned. Oak Ridge was mentioned. You know, throughout the entire county. I would get this on the agenda with Travel Lane County as soon as possible. I think Chair Farr is our liaison to Travel Lane County as well. We can be helpful there. But it also gets you in front of the major hoteliers here locally. We have one in particular who's been a past chairman of the board, Mr. Richard Boyles, who has hotels throughout the state, throughout the Northwest, as a matter of fact. And plus, they have such a grasp and understanding of the TRT and how that's, and not that our staff doesn't, our staff actually does greatly. But I think the more that people see this and what it means, not just for Florence, but for all of Lane County, I think it becomes even stronger. Because I noticed one of the pieces in here, you're wanting a decision by November 30th. So we're about less than a month away. And we'll have Mr. Dingle, of course, go through the legal aspects of this as well. But from my perspective, I think the more you get folks engaged and energized, not just from your city, because you mentioned something that's very important. You're the gateway of the Pacific Ocean of Lane County. You're it. And not only that, you're a significant gateway for the entire state of Oregon. And so the more you engage from the folks from Travel Lane County, which would get you more connected with Travel Oregon, and it'd get more connected with folks who really understand and have a strong grasp of the tourism industry, what it means for not only Florence and Lane County, but for Oregon as a whole. And you get that national piece. The one thing that we recommended yesterday, and I don't know if we can actually make it official in the book, but it'd be the off meetings, and that is start the conversation with we call United Front, which is, this is our trip back to DC to lobby our federal delegation. But on the 2021 World Track and Field Games, because while we know, I will assure you, it's not really on the tongue of very many folks elsewhere. And the name I mentioned was Congressman Walden, who holds a very powerful position in D.C. I'm not even sure Greg's even faintly aware about the World Track and Field Games either. But it's important to get our federal delegation in really significantly talking about that. But this is where I think by 2021, if much of this can be complete or you have some avenue, you have 220 countries from around the world coming in, and not just here for the 10 days of the games. They're going to be spending the month here, whether it's in Portland, whether the case may be. We want them here. Yeah. We want them to look to see what we have to offer and what Lane County means to the rest of the world. So that's my suggestion. So if whenever you can, I would really press the issue of being able to present before Travel Lane County, and just by the folks who are on that board. This is their life. This is their livelihood, is the travel and tourism industry. And I think that by what we see, I mean, this is really exciting to see. By what we see, I think that they would be really motivated to be Minnie would be a champion for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much for this presentation. And, the first time I was in the rhododendron parade was about 1965, so that was a while back. But that giant wide highway through Florence is such a problem for your community, because what a gorgeous community, and yet because of that sort of industrial type highway, the visitors to Florence don't get the same experience that they would get at Depot Bay, that they would get at some other places along the coast. Now, I was raised in North Bend, Oregon, so I don't want to hold that out as the, great example. But I think that what you're trying to do here, anyone that's spent any time in and around Florence would recognize that you're really on the path to really improving it. A couple of things I would ask, and you don't have to really answer it here. If you can, that'd be great. If not, maybe you could build that into future remarks or future communications with us or others. One is that our weather on the Oregon coast is highly variable. We will get a lot of wind, we will get a lot of rain, we will get a lot of sun, and most of the time it will be changing rapidly. You could have sun in the morning, you could have rain in the afternoon, you get wind all night. I mean, one thing you probably can't have is sun all night. But other than that, you could probably have any kind of combination. And in the designs or photos or diagrams, there's a lot of outdoor emphasis, right? I mean, you're not going to put a cover over the whole thing for 7 miles. So you're going to have to be dealing with the vagaries of the weather. And I would just encourage you to think about something that's really design oriented to an area that's got a lot of wind, that's got the potential for rain, and think about shelters, and I don't mean shelter in the sense of setting up emergency Marine Corps tents, but I'm thinking in terms of wind barriers. I'm thinking in terms of plexiglass, that people can still see things, but they will have some shelter. In the same way that many of the people who live on the coast have those built into their own backyards or on their own decks so that they can enjoy the weather and enjoy the time in their homes and outside of their homes, near their home, but not get rained on or not get blown off. So those are things that I think need to be thought about, because if you take the design that works for Scottsdale or the design that works for Eugene, you may not be able to use that type of design in the weather. And by the way, one of the great things about adapting your own home, whether you live in Eugene or Florence, to the outdoors is with a couple of simple barriers and a couple of simple architectural changes, you can make your home where you can enjoy the outdoors maybe 7 months of the year, maybe 8 months of the year, because our weather can be fairly pleasant a lot of the time. So I just think that's a feature that you got to think about in that design. I know as a kid, it always bothered me that when I got out of school and I wanted to play baseball with my friends, that the wind came up so harsh in North Bend, Oregon. I thought, why don't we have the school when it's windy? Why do we get out of school at the time when we want to be able to play? And I think that memory, although it's rather dated now, over a half century, I would say that is still a reality, that you're going to have afternoon wind, and it's going to be pretty difficult for people to go outside unless you've planned for it. And on the money side of it, I'm looking forward to hearing from Ms. Moody, our money person around here, one of our money people, to find out the fairness of what you're proposing. I thought you did a nice job with the percentage, the money that came in as a result of the TRT in Florence and the number of dollars that the TRT and even nearby places like the county campground, state park campground, the place south of town that looks north across the river. To me, that's all relevant to making sure you get your fair share of the TRT revenue. And I just think that what you're doing here is really great because it's going to really improve the quality of life for people that live in Florence, but it's also going to improve your tourist economy and the people I represent that come to Florence a lot. And I'd like to make sure that they get that kind of beautiful area that you're planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. And I see Ms. Souza's here. Ms. Souza, we are running a little long on this agenda item, so bear with us, and we'll get to yours once we're finished here. A few more things to say. I believe Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Green, Aaron, thank you for your presentation and being here. I believe that Commissioner Lyken offered you some excellent sage advice and direction. I think that is invaluable, and I hope that you implement some aspects of that. I'm a former mayor as well, as is Mr. Lyken, and these kinds of projects are very exciting for a community. They are the identifier of who you are as a community. I had the great pleasure to serve as president of the League of Oregon Cities and the Oregon Mayors Association. And in that capacity, I had the opportunity to go around the state and look at numerous communities that had projects somewhat like yours. Areas that were less than attractive that have been transformed into the heart of those communities. So what you've offered here is an excellent, clean, concise vision, which is easy to get my arms and my mind around. I love Florence. It's one of my most favorite places in Oregon. I try and get over there as often as I can. I agree with some of the comments that I've watched over the years, the boardwalk down on Bay Street, I believe it's Bay Street, and Old Town, the transformation. Some of the businesses have been mentioned here, the kitchen thing. My wife loves going in there, and we always make a purchase. There's a little bookstore across the street. I always go in and make a purchase at that bookstore. Of course, Moe's, have to have my chowder bowl, and there's a lot of magic that happens in Florence. And then at the other end, you had the great road improvements that all of those things work hand in glove to make a community vibrant. And I just am very, very pleased to see what you folks have envisioned here, and I wish you Godspeed on the development of this. Please take Commissioner Lyken's suggestions to heart and implement those. They're of critical importance for you to develop additional partners. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. And don't forget, on your feet. We never stop. Fail to stop it on your feet. And Commissioner Sorensen, Tillamook Cheesemakers, you know, North Bend is like a walk in the tropics compared to Tillamook County. And just very briefly, I'll be very brief before I ask Mr. Dingell to step forward. Jeff, you're here from ODOT, and I'd like to compliment what happened in Yachats. The transformation that took place with Yachats. Some of the very things that you're talking about in Florence, the sidewalks, and Commissioner Sorensen talked about the great wide highway that's formidable. Well, Yachats had a great wide highway that doesn't seem anywhere near as formidable as it used to. And the drift in is a lot easier to go to these days. So the things that happen in Yachats, I see some of those things happening in Florence. And the Quinn 2nd Street loop, which it really is a loop from 126 to 101, you know, that can be vibrant. It could be a boulevard. You know, it can be an entrance from both sides into the downtown. I usually take Harbor when I go in because I like you've got lots of parking right there. I mean, going to Florence is just delightful, and I could go on for a long time about that. The last thing I would say is that, no, I've said it. I'm a cheesemaker. Mr. Dingell, if you would step forward, and sorry we're holding you a little bit long, but and
that's okay. I can stand.
And does Ms. Moody, do you have something to present also?
I think what I What I would suggest, Mr. Chair, is I'll just I'm going to be very quick. I sent you a memorandum on the legality of it, and if you look at, I'm not sure which slide it is, but it's the one that says what qualifies for TRT. I'm very comfortable saying that all of the things up to the landscaping clearly qualify. I can recommend those without reservation. The landscaping is a little bit different. And I think that Ms. Moody added that up, and that comes to $1.86 million. And I think really the person you want to talk to is Ms. Moody. So unless there's a specific question. Okay.
Any questions for Ms. Dingle? The bullet pointed list right there was, once again, exactly what we asked for when we suggested you come back. Commissioner Sorensen.
What is the legal reason that landscaping but plinths are allowed?
Because the plinths are concrete and are going to last forever.
Okay.
I'm not so sure that the landscaping will. They're designed.
Blackberries in my yard seem to be lasting. Okay, so your view is that landscaping is more a matter of labor and not necessarily a lasting.
Right.
What if it was like a hardscape as opposed to a plant?
If it were a thing like the Oregon Gardens or whatever, I think you could get there. As I understand it, this is more what I would consider to be just sort of not routine but traditional landscaping. Mm-hmm. And I'm not as comfortable saying that meets the definition of a substantial asset.
A substantial asset, is that what has to be shown to use?
Something that
we could break that down a little more if we needed to. I think there are some elements like trees you would expect to last 10 years or longer, but I understand what you're saying.
So if it's a short-term landscape, like what, mowing a grass, mowing a lawn?
Right, or like I said, I think the one thing that would really clearly fit there would be if you were making, for example, in the case of Florence, if you were making a rhododendron garden, that was a specific facility, dedicated to do that.
Mm-hmm. The Florence Rhododendron Garden.
Excuse me, yes.
That's okay, whatever the name would be, okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
May I just address one thing about the landscaping is the area by the plaza is going to have like a berm, an area where it's more decorative and places for the benches to exist to sit and possibly also be out of the wind is part of the idea. So that's part of the overall landscaping, which you don't really see in these pieces. But maybe we can break that down for you.
Thanks. And as Ms. Moody steps up, I believe you have some things to say. I'll mention just real briefly, the European marketing director for Travel Oregon, her husband grew up in Florence, managed a Safeway store for years there, and his mom and dad were the hosts at Honeyman for many, many years. His name's Bob Davis. And the European marketing director, I emigrated to the United States in 1965 with her, my baby sister. Oh. So, Mr. Mokrahajski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we're about 55 minutes into a 45-minute item, and we want to get to the meat of the City of Florence's request and direction ultimately from the board on what you would like to do. And in order to do that, I'd like to invite Ms. Moody and Ms. Heaton up to the table for a moment here so we can talk about the financial aspects of this. Ms. Moody as our budget manager and Ms. Heaton as the Public Works budget manager who oversees the road fund. And so the request from the City of Florence is both for use of transient room taxes for up to $1.2 million over 6 years, and then road funds of approximately $800,000 from the newly approved transportation package. So I'd like to first take the transient room tax piece, and I'll just provide a bit of an overview, and then Christine, if you have some additional comments. Florence provided good information for you about the amount of room taxes generated within Florence. Important to know that approximately half of the room taxes collected by Lane County go to Travel Lane County to fund tourism marketing throughout Lane County, including in Florence. Over $3 million per year goes from the transit room taxes we collect, including from Florence, go to fund Travel Lane County and the visitor marketing that happens there. In addition, about $711,000 goes to fund park operations, which includes parks in Florence. So I wanted to provide that. Additionally, the Lane Event Center receives a portion of funding. The Historic Museum rural receives about $300,000. Rural tourism provides about $305,000 per year. Special projects are about $100,000 per year. So the piece of transient room taxes that we would look at to fund this project would be from the Tourism Capital Fund. There's approximately $180,000 per year that goes in transient room taxes that we collect that goes into the Tourism Capital Fund. If you take the $1.2 million that Florence is requesting over 6 years, that's approximately $200,000 per year. So we would essentially be allocating 100% of the Tourism Capital Fund, which is $180,000 for 6 years towards this project, and then we'd have to come up with another $20,000 per year over 6 years, which we would likely pull out of the reserve within that tourism capital. Does that make sense? So we would take 100% of the TRT funds collected through that go to the Tourism Capital Fund, which is $180,000, and then we would pull another $20,000 per year out of reserve from that fund. And so those funds would not be available for 6 years. We would have no tourism capital funds. So just keep that in mind as we look at other requests that have been made. We know that the city of Springfield has come forward and they're looking for the county's partnership and contribution towards the Glenwood project. We had considered the tourism capital as one source of funding for that. That would not be, and I'm saying this I'm saying this just so the board knows that if you take that action, anywhere we pull funding, $2 million, 1.2 or $2 million in funding will have an impact in terms of the impact on other requests that come to the county. We have 12 cities in Lane County and a lot of people seeking resources to do really important work. So that would take up that piece of it. And then we also do have other comments about transient room taxes. Sure.
Maybe, I think if I understood Commissioner Sorensen's comment earlier, he was interested in maybe a little more specifics on the transient room tax that's generated in the city of Florence. I do have a little bit of data on that if you would like to hear that. The breakdown of TRT gets complicated fast. I know the board is familiar with that, but there's the pieces that it might appear that Lane County is receiving a 5% tax from within cities, but actually 3% of that passes through our budget going to Travel Lane County, the museum, the areas that the commissioner that Steve just mentioned for you. So the 2% stays in the county budget, and then that's part of excuse me, still fighting off this cold, that goes to Lane Event Center, the parks, and others. So just to give you an idea, for fiscal year 16-17, the Florence area, the county piece, that 2% budget was about $183,000 that came into the county budget from the Florence area. So as we said, that goes towards Lane Event Center, parks, and the other areas that were mentioned. Then I will just also add that City of Florence then also receives back from us. Last year, well, actually they're going to get the check here soon. The board just voted on this, is $108,000 from the rural tourism piece where we send a check back to them. So that gives you a little more idea of the amounts that we're talking about per year.
So I will just say again that the request for $1.2 million, I think that, that could be satisfied from transient room tax. You heard Mr. Dingle say that it's legally allowable for the areas that those first 4 areas, not including the landscaping. There's some debate about that, and I know there's probably some additional clarification, but it looks like there are items that total in excess of $1.2 million. That don't include the landscaping. So it is legally allowable. It is financially possible for the county to contribute that $1.2 million over 6 years, but again, it will require 100% of the tourism capital funds for 6 years, so that will not be available for any other projects for that period of time. It will also require us to pull another $20,000 per year out of the reserve, which we can do. So that one is, so the board's decision will seek direction from you at the end here about whether or not you would like to have us bring forward, and we certainly could. I think on November 28th is the next board meeting. You're down the next 2 weeks. But to satisfy the city's request for action by November 30th, we could bring forward an item for you on November 28th. Related to that piece. The other question, so we're happy to answer questions about TRT. The other question is around the transportation funding. And so again, you saw the request for $800,000 from the newly approved transportation package. And I want Ms. Heaton to share with you some comments about what the intended purpose of that is. I'll just make a general comment that that funding, that state package is, there are portions of that funding that is allocated both to cities throughout Oregon and Lane County, as well as counties. Lane County will receive a portion of that, and it had been the board's intent, as we had a work session previously, to allocate those resources towards preventative maintenance, ongoing maintenance and operations of roads. This would be a capital improvement connected to an ODOT road project. So allowable use, I think, for some portions of that may be possible, but there just needs to be a thought and direction from the board based on your priorities as they relate to a use of those limited transportation resources. So I want Ms. Heaton to provide a little more context for that.
Okay. So first, Tim wanted me to apologize for him that he could not be here today. He had another commitment. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Very well, thank you.
So as Steve mentioned, on September 12th, we came to you and presented our plan on what items we would use to set the priorities for the new transportation revenue. If you remember, we have a transportation system plan, a transportation safety action plan, and a road and bridge performance audit. And we're trying to address all of the needs in those three plans and move forward. The other item that we have is we have the jurisdictional transfers, where ODOT is transferring Territorial Highway and the Crestwell Springfield pieces of that highway, which a lot of us really know as Cloverdale Road. And those two items are coming to us with some money to make some improvements that have already been identified, but no ongoing operational money. So with all of that, and I know we're short time, so even though Tim and I prepared this long thing, I think the thing that to keep in mind is years ago, when there was more money in the road fund, we had city partnerships, and we had partnerships with all of the cities. In more recent years, we have partnered with cities over particular projects. So we could certainly do this. You need to think about whether this is opening up something and you want to set up a process to go through to see whether this meets with the priorities of the road fund as we have established and are moving forward with, or whether you want to just do it as they come in. That's up to you. So is the money there? Yes, we could do this. Is it in line with the things that we discussed earlier in September? No, as far as we know. That doesn't mean that there's not something in the very large report that they did for you that we could tie to it. Is that, I know I was very general. Does anybody have any specific questions they would like me to answer?
Thank you, Ms. Eaton. Questions? Commissioner Lycan, questions regarding the road fund?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you'd mentioned, Tanya, about the potential of, and this would have to be, we'd have to get an answer from Florence as well, because you're correct. So based on the package, each jurisdiction got a piece of the pie.
Right.
And so with additional dollars coming into Florence, could this be a partnership between Lane County and Florence is one question I have. The other is I'd like to know the timing on this from Florence. So that's going to be important for me, because the reason why I asked this question is our road fund has been absolutely obliterated for the last, let's just say 6 years to be really conservative. And this is also an opportunity to make sure when dollars come in, we kind of fill some of those areas. We have backlogs in place right now. So I don't mind looking at this as a potential, but I think there needs to be a partnership involved here. The other thing that I'm going to hold a little optimism out on, and that is the current administration has clearly stated rural highways are our top priority. And I do know that the Secretary Chow and her staff have a package about 90% written, with rural highways being such a significant focus. Now, we don't want to bank on that,
Right.
because Congress gets to vote. But we can bank on what the legislature did in a sense. So my question will be on timing. So this will be from Florence. And if a partnership between Lane County and Florence can maybe work together on this, Lane County has the background clearly to do all the engineering, the survey work. I mean, this is where we have that cities don't necessarily have. And then the other piece that I'd just like to ask is making sure that we ask ODOT the question about how much are they willing to partner on this, because it is linking into the state system. So where can ODOT maybe bring a little bit involved in this as well? So those are my questions. But timing is going to be a key here to me, because I think we need to be careful about just from the road fund aspect, just to go out and say, let's just start hitting projects because of the backlog we have. And we need to make sure that those dollars are in place, that we just don't spend and realize that, oh, what happened to the backlogs? And also, you can't, none of us have a crystal ball, but there is a real distinct possibility that we're going to be dealing with landslides again this year, and based on what happened this summer. So those are questions I have. So I don't want to deter the idea at all. I think this makes sense, and I think it's a good project. But timing is going to be everything for me on this, to see how we can allocate. That's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. And just a process check, we only have one meeting between now and November 30th. That is November 28th. And one option we have is to steer toward potentially a board order for November 28th. Not positive if we can quite get toward that steering during this discussion. We have a full agenda for the rest of the morning. Some of us have noon break commitments already, so we're not really able to press into the noon, past the noon. So, Ms. Morkowski, I'll ask you, if we needed to steer toward a board order for November 28th, we've been asked for 1.2 plus $0.8 million from two different sources. What would we need to do to give you those instructions right now?
Well, you would, I guess it's a question for County Council if it requires a motion. That wouldn't be a bad idea, although you could also give head nods to direct staff. That probably would be sufficient to prepare a board order and bring it back on November 28th or another date to that effect. So the direction we're looking for today is, do you want us to bring back a formal action that the board would consider to allocate resources towards this project, and specifically as it relates to the transit room tax and the road fund piece? You heard us say, again, the policy considerations for the board are, do you want to contribute $1.2 million in TRT funds, which then will not be available for other projects? That's the consideration to make. It would allow you to help move this this incredible project from Florence forward, but it would also mean that those funds would not be available for other projects. So that's just a reality. And then the policy question related to the use of state transportation funds from the newly approved state package that would go towards an ODOT road improvement, not county road or bridge improvements. And so it just, those are, I present this to you in that way because these are factors the board needs to consider. If you make an investment in one place, it's going to mean you're not going to be able to make an investment in another place. So that's what we need today is direction from you on both of those matters.
Thank you, Ms. Morkowski. That makes it very clear. And if we were to direct you to come back with 1.2 plus 0.8, that doesn't mean necessarily that we'd pass it or that we'd leave those two numbers intact as 1.2 and 0.8. would have a discussion regarding some form of partnership or some form of redistribution of those two amounts of money. So with that, I'll turn to the board. Do we want to move forward with a November 28th board item where we would further discuss this with the actual potential action in mind? Commissioner Sorensen, then.
Well, will we be hearing from Travel Lane about this issue? Because obviously they're going to have it's going to affect them.
That is a critical discussion that we need to have, and as the liaison to Travel Lane County, Ms. Mokrahayski often joins me at those meetings. We could address that with the leadership of or the director of Travel Lane County to get some input between now and November 28th.
Just so I'm clear, what is the request of Travel Lane County related to this item?
Just for them to give it their blessing. Very simply, no. Just to see what conditions they may have surrounding money that they get a large share of currently, and they're invested in the obviously in tourism for all of Lane County. So.
And just on that point, Mr. Chair, the TRT funds, the tourism capital money that I referenced, that fund that receives about $180,000 per year, would not impact Travel Lane County. Travel Lane County gets essentially a direct allocation for tourism marketing. So it's unlikely that Travel Lane County would contribute to it. I suppose you could ask that if they would contribute some portion, but what they do is market the destination. And so it would not have an impact on the amount of money that goes to Travel Lane County.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Then any further questions regarding the potential request for November 28th?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I was here when we had the road fund partnership with the cities, and I would like to ask Tanya this question. As a result of the state legislation that was passed earlier this year, is there enough money in the road fund to restart a city-county road fund partnership?
There is not enough annual coming in based on the estimates that we shared that we're using that came from AOC. There's not enough to restart that program at the same level that we used to do it. Years ago, we distributed $2.5 million annually, with $35,000 going to each of the cities. And then an additional portion was divided up based on their road miles. Keep in mind that the same percentage that we are getting out of the new transportation revenue, that same estimate, the AOC estimate, when I looked at the city portions of that, Florence is going to be getting approximately $1.5 million, I believe, over the same period of that estimate. So they're already getting an increase, just like counties are.
Yeah, okay. The board, if we do get into a situation where, as a result of federal transportation changes, or more knowledge about what the effect of the 2017 legislation is in Oregon, you might want to think about that city-county road partnership. When Mayor Tory was mayor of Eugene, and Commissioner Green was the North Eugene commissioner, and Steve Kronacchia was the Springfield commissioner, we were able to get a county-city road partnership program going. But as our funding declined, we got rid of that program. But that was something that cities benefited from. And with the high minimum, cities like Dune City and Westford and Lowell really benefited a lot because they got, relative to their populations, a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
So that was something that the board worked out as a as a way to help out cities with
Thank you,
their road
Commissioner
problem.
Swenson. And before I craft a form of instruction for Ms. Mokrajewski, Commissioner Lycan, please.
Just real quick, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, we were receiving over $20 million in federal money. That's why that road fund was successful, because yours truly was the mayor of Springfield at the time, and our check was $1.2 million, and that was 15 years ago. Now index that to inflation. Yeah, there's no way at this point in time that county-city partnership can happen the way it did at one time. Absolutely not. Not going to happen. And until we receive additional federal money, and I mean the significant amount we were receiving, there's just absolutely no way. Lane County is involved in grants now. Lane County never did grants. Lane County had money. And Lane County was the match to all these major big projects. I-5 Beltline Interchange was a Lane County match. And it's just not going to happen. So that's why I'm asking again for timing and asking what kind of partnership can be involved here, because I'm going to caution the board right now on dipping too much, if at all, into our road funds. We've got to build this back up. And it's been devastated for the last 6 years conservatively. Actually longer than that, but it's been devastated. Those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. We've had a great discussion surrounding this morning, both the attributes and the challenges in funding it. So I'm going to try and craft just an instruction for you, Ms. Mokrajewski. We would ask that the staff prepare an action item for November 28th, which would include the request of 1.2 from TRT and 0.8 from Road Fund for a board discussion and potential action on November 28th, bearing in mind that it is discussion potential action, and that those two numbers, there are questions that exist surrounding the full allocation that's being asked. To the board, does that cover what we've been discussing? And Ms. Mokrajewski, does that give you enough to work on?
It does. If you want us to bring forward, you would like to bring forward an action to consider allocating 1.2 million from TRT and 800,000 from the road fund.
Looking to the rest of the board, I cannot alone ask you for that, but
just real quickly, Mr. Chair, on the road fund piece, I want the added language to make sure that Lane County and Florence are talking about who is going to add what. I don't know how, if we're even. Once we open this door, folks, I just want you to know, once the door is open, wait for all the other projects to come asking for Lane County for road fund money, when, while I'm appreciative of what the legislature did, it wasn't that much. It wasn't $20 million. So that's why I'm just going to add, I would ask that you would add that piece of language involved to discuss what kind of potential partnerships involved and what added potential partnerships involved with ODOT. I think that's key between now and the 28th.
So clearly there's a note of caution involved in this entire request. So.
Mr. Chair, I just want to, Commissioner Lycan had asked, and it is our understanding that the state of Oregon is contributing $2.5 million through ODOT for, these are ODOT highways, and so this is an ODOT project, and the city of Florence and its urban renewal agency is also contributing approximately $2.8 million towards the project, because it's a project, and then Lane County is being asked to fill the remaining gap through both TRT and road funds. So that's where the $2 million request comes from.
And as you move forward with staff crafting thank you. Crafting the agenda item, then potentially you could work with the agenda team to work on some of the details of what we present on what's presented on November 28th. Is that clear enough and with enough note of caution as we move forward? So we're not promising anything other than we will discuss it again on November 28th with more detail as to the money itself. And want to congratulate you on what was truly an excellent presentation this morning to the team from Florence and from ODOT. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's true. Thank you
all for your kind words and your support of the project. Thanks. Councilor Green, Mayor Henry, thank you very much. Then we'll move forward to the next item on our agenda, which is Order 171107-02 in the matter of amending the West Eugene Enterprise Public Zone, public benefit criteria and scoring system. And as we're changing the panel, I'd like to welcome Amanda Souza and Ms. Sarah Means. We went through a lengthy process with the former Commissioner, Faye Stewart, and I were a part of the task force that did the work on the presentation that you're going to give us today. So thank you very much. Ms. Means?
I'm going to, just one moment, please.
I'll remind the public that all this entire item is covered on our website under agenda items. Just click on view items.
Sorry, technically challenged here today.
That's the first time I've heard you say it. Ever, and I mean that.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Farr, Board. Pleased to be with you this morning, and thank you for your time. Sarah Means, your Economic Development Manager, and I'm here with Amanda D'Souza, who is the City of Eugene's Economic Development Analyst, and who does a lot of work around the West Eugene Enterprise Zone and other things. Just to give you some very brief history, I'm not going to speak too much today. This is really going to be Amanda going through some specifics around the West Eugene Enterprise Zone. But to give you a little bit of history and reminder, back in 2016, the West Eugene Enterprise Zone was up for redesignation. The board approved, along with the city council, that redesignation. As part of the redesignation, the city of Eugene and Lane County chooses to implement some public benefit criteria at any point when we are considering an enterprise zone application for the West Eugene Enterprise Zone. That public benefit criteria had been established 10 years prior when the original designation was enacted, and it was thought that we needed to take a look at that public benefit criteria and maybe do some updates. As a result, the City Council and the board both appointed a couple of members to a task force. You might recall that both Chair Farr and former Commissioner Stewart were your board representatives, and then there were two additional public representatives that did participate in that process. I was also at the table and present through those discussions, along with two city councilors, Councilor Polling and Councilor Pryor, right? Along with Amanda, and then two other community representatives that the council chose. We took about a year, I believe, to go through this process and update. It was very thoughtful, and certainly Chair Farr can give you his perspective on the process, but I believe it was a very thoughtful process and one that resulted in an updated version of the public benefit criteria. The City Council has approved the public benefit criteria, and now it's your turn to review and let us know what you think. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda. She's going to take you through some of the changes. I promise that we will be brief and get you out of here so that you can make your noon appointments, and then I will be available for any questions on the other side of this. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. You want me to run this? I can click through it.
I call you Amanda Souza a couple of times. I apologize.
It's all right. I've heard every version of my name. So Sarah set up a lot of the context, so I can actually skip through a lot of these initial slides. So background on the criteria. These were first imposed in 2005, and we currently have 9 criteria. They were kind of established to reflect the values that were important at that time. And in addition to those 9 categories, we also have a job creation cap, which limits the amount of tax exemptions a business can get. And so each cap depends on the number of jobs that a business has created with their new investment. So I'll first do a high-level overview of the changes, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. So most of the task force work was concentrated on updating specific criteria, but there were 3 category name changes. So the first is with category 1, which was broadening small business to business type, broadening referral agency hiring, and number 3 to include local hiring and local sourcing, and then replacing the construction category with sustainability in number 5. So in addition to this, the task force spent time reprioritizing the criteria based on discussion and the community values they felt was important. And this is reflected in the number of points awarded in each category. And you'll be able to follow along in attachment B in your materials. So the first benefit criteria is business type. This category expands on the small business category by trying to level the playing field for certain business types that may have difficulty in providing other benefits in the criteria due to limited funding and resources. This category still awards points based on business size, with smaller businesses getting more points. And the task force added a new point for businesses that are minority-owned, woman-owned, or disadvantaged businesses. The second category is wages, which encourages offering high wages for employees. It offers points based on how a company's median wage compares to the county's median wage in the traded sectors. The criteria includes the existing thresholds where businesses will get points if they meet the median wage, or there's a lower threshold for smaller businesses. And a new addition to the criteria is to offer an extra point for businesses who offer wages even higher than the median wage. The criteria also includes language to address the new minimum wage laws and the possibility that the minimum wage could exceed the median wage threshold. So the criteria has a floor threshold that will always be above the minimum wage, regardless of how that increases. And then they also increase the category importance. The third category is local hiring and sources. It emphasizes the importance of using available sources that offer employment assistance and training for local job seekers, and it encourages locally sourcing materials needed for business operations. And this is the one that evolved from the referral agency hiring category. And then we added 3 new criteria. The first is a procurement plan, which encourages businesses to source their materials and supplies from local and regional vendors. We added the creation of a plan or policy that aims to increase contracting opportunities for minority and women businesses. We added criteria about having a diversity or equity plan or policy in place to integrate diversity into the workplace and the hiring process. And then we also increase the importance of this category. The fourth category is employee benefits, which is designed to encourage businesses to offer additional employee benefits beyond what is required by law. So the only change to this criteria was the addition of the wellness program, which we defined as programs that are provided as preventative measures to help avoid illness and maintain good health by offering incentives to participate. Examples include smoking cessation, diabetes management, gym membership, things like that. Fifth category was sustainability. So this is what was adapted from the former construction category. And this is designed to encourage businesses to make an effort to reduce their negative impact on the environment. So this is the one that saw the most changes. It primarily focuses on transportation and impact to natural systems. The first criteria in this category focuses on Bring's Rethink program, which provides a comprehensive green audit consultation, which assesses a number of sustainability areas. We added criteria about how businesses can encourage their employees to use alternative transportation methods. We added criteria about consulting with the city to understand how they can modify their day-to-day operations in order to reduce their impact on the transportation system and to reduce their energy consumption. We added criteria about implementing stormwater management beyond what is required by city code. And then we added criteria pertaining to applicable businesses who participate in the city's Love Food Not Waste program. The redevelopment category aligns with the city's infill and redevelopment goals as embodied in Envision Eugene, and it encourages the reuse of underutilized sites and increased productivity of already developed sites. The task force kept the existing criteria in this category. They also added additional criteria for businesses who actually clean up on-site contamination as a part of their investment. The health insurance category rewards businesses who offer more health care coverage than is required by law. There's a lot of discussion about this category given how the healthcare landscape has changed and also the uncertainty as to what it's going to look like in the future. So the changes made to this category reflect that businesses with 50 or more employees are required to offer medical benefits for their employees. So the criteria now only awards small businesses who offer coverage for their employees. And then we kept the criteria that awards businesses points who offer coverage to families regardless of business size. And then the task force reduced the weight of that category as well. The 8th category encourages businesses to provide training and advancement to opportunities for employees. The task force kept the current criteria, which gives points based on how much training is provided and whether they have an advancement policy. They added criteria if a business offers diversity or equity training for their employees. And they also added criteria pertaining to the recognition of the National Career Readiness Certificate, which is a tool that job seekers can use to demonstrate certain skills to potential employers. And currently, businesses can sign a letter of support with Lane Workforce Partnership to demonstrate their recognition of the certificate. The last criteria is investment size, which takes into account that businesses making significantly large investments will eventually be making large property tax payments on the investments once their exemption ends. And so after reviewing the size of the investments made in the enterprise zone since 2005, which there's a pretty wide distribution, the task force decided to keep the existing criteria and increased the category weight. So in addition to the 9 criteria, we also looked at the job cap criteria to see if it needed an update. The current criteria sets the cap at $32,000 per year per job created. And since our average exemption right now is about $8,600 per job created, the task force didn't make any changes to this criteria. And then the last step was discussing the scoring system for the public benefit criteria. So currently, businesses must score at least 25 points in order to get the full tax exemption. Businesses are assigned to each of the criteria based on priority. And during their discussions, the task force reprioritized the old and new criteria and modified the assigned points so that they better reflect the value of each. The task force chose to keep this 25-point threshold, but they introduced a tiered system. In order to show the importance of the higher criteria, they suggested that 15 of these 25 points should come from the first 4 categories, which reflect the more prioritized values. And then City Council, when they were considering this criteria in July, they also added the requirement that businesses should obtain at least 6 of those 25 points from the Tier 2 criteria, so as not to kind of ignore that those criteria are there and they're still important to us. So as Sarah mentioned, Council already took action on these criteria, and once the county takes action today, assuming it's positive, the criteria would be implemented and applied to any future businesses who apply for the enterprise zone.
And just to clarify, I don't think we made this clear in the beginning. The public benefit criteria apply only to the businesses that are applying for a 5-year exemption.
Oh, no, it's for all businesses.
Is it
yeah,
for
it's for all businesses.
My apologies. I stand corrected by the expert. I thought it was only for the 5-year exemption.
It's for all businesses, and the way the state statute is written is a business who qualifies for the enterprise zone and meets all of the basic requirements, which is that 10% increase in employment, will always get 25 or 75% of the exemption. So this criteria is only for the final 25%. We can only claw back a certain amount.
That was what I was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. D'Souza. Great presentation. And before I ask for a motion and discussion, we are considering Order 17-1107-02, already passed by the Eugene City Council intact. Just wanted to mention the process that we went through. It was pretty exhaustive. We had a great discussion, and I I remember that one of the non-elected participants was John Roberts, who was a very active participant in the discussion. We went back and forth on a lot of items, and the product that you've presented to us today is an excellent product that took into account a great many points beyond the ones that we settled on finally. So very, very well done. So board, we have as before is Order 1711-0702. I'll ask for discussion and or a motion. Commissioner Bozievich.
So for discussion, I'll move approval of Order 1711-0702 in the matter of amending the West Eugene Enterprise Zone Public Benefit Criteria and Scoring System.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozievich, seconded by Commissioner Lycan. Discussion to the motion. I see no discussion at this point. Then I will. Oh, Commissioner Bozievich.
Yeah, I just kind of have to ask the question as I look through some of these criteria. Some of them are so, I guess, unrelated to direct public benefit in my mind. And I know you served on the committee, but it just, or seems like steering a business's, HR policies and various things. It seems, we're getting on beyond, and I guess because it's only for 25% of the tax reduction, that's where we're looking at the public benefit. But it just, if it weren't for the fact that this, it's coming to the board here at the 11th hour, and basically we get a choice of either approving it or not approving it, and I don't know what happens if we don't approve this. If I vote no on this, does that mean we lose the enterprise zone at this point, or does it mean that we go back to task force meetings? But as I look at these criteria, there's some in there that just kind of make my head spin, to be honest. So I'm kind of wondering, maybe real quick, what happens if the board were to vote against this?
So,
if I may, I'll respond to the first part of Commissioner Bozievich's question. You entrusted Commissioner Stewart and I to do this work, and we did it in good faith. And the question that you have regarding some of the things being a little bit more esoteric than directly applying to the public benefit, certainly. And that is the nature of the discussion that we had. However, the criteria here, up to 25 points, are voluntary. The applicants don't necessarily have to address every one of them or any of them. It's just, and it becomes a part of the decision-making process that the board and the county takes into account subsequent to that. So while some of them do not, but it's arguable, do or do not represent the public benefit, they're voluntary. It's not required that, and some of these are just 1 point out of 100. So it's it's not that it's a huge issue, but some of it, the city of Eugene certainly had a great deal of input, and some of the esoteric items potentially came from the city of Eugene, but the two commissioners that you entrusted to going through this process went through it with good faith, and this is the product that we came up with. So, please.
So, and Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong here, but we don't lose the enterprise zone designation should you not adopt these. We have the designation, and these are allowed to be implemented by choice with the local jurisdiction. Because we are a co-sponsor of this enterprise zone, we are asked to also formally adopt the public benefit criteria. I don't know that we've had a situation where one co-sponsor has adopted and one has not. So you're testing my limits in terms of process there. My estimation would be that we would go back to the task force committee and have those conversations again with some folks that are appointed to that by this board and by the city council.
Thank you, Ms. Means. Commissioner Bozevich, does that address the questions?
Then, yeah, I'll it's one of those things where I'll probably end up voting yes to go along and get along, but, participation in the love, food, not waste, as an enterprise zone criteria, just, little things like that. It's just, I kind of shake my head about how detailed some of that got and how in the weeds some of this got. And I know you two were two participants on that, but you were only two out of how many on the committee, and I'm sure, and it just, to where it got to at the end product, like a lot of things designed by committee, that's how we got giraffes and a few other animals in the wild kingdom were animals designed by committee, like a platypus.
So we'll call this the Noah's Ark. Court order. Very good. Then the other thing I'll say about some of the very specific criteria, like Bring's criteria, we use Bring because they did a good job of summarizing some of the elements of the criteria. It's not that Bring themselves are the ones that we're asking, to participate. It's the elements that Bring actually stated in their criteria. So it goes beyond a little bit the actual name of the criterion. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the West Eugene Enterprise Zone, is this all within the location of the Eugene city limits, or is this part of within the urban growth boundary?
I believe it's within the urban growth boundary, yeah.
The reason why I bring that up, to answer Commissioner Bozovich's question, when I was mayor and a previous board would not adopt an enterprise zone within Springfield, so we just adopted within the city limits only, and it was legal. So yes, that issue has come up before. And that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think if these aren't adopted today, then it would just revert back to the existing criteria, which are in place now. So.
Yeah, there are existing criteria in place that were adopted about 10, 11 years ago now, when in 2006, when the West Eugene Enterprise Zone was first designated / redesignated. There's a period of time when we didn't have one. So it would just revert back to that, the old criteria for the time being. And until these are approved, that's certainly what we would be using should any applications come.
The city of Eugene voted for this, and so I'm comfortable about moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. Then we have before us Order 1711-07-02. Further discussion, Commissioner Sorensen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, and this is more for the board and Mr. Mokryski, that when we have these things that are going on for a period of time, there's a bunch of people, task force meetings, updates, public hearings, and yet then as Commissioner Bozovich points out, we are in the position then of being the folks at the end where it's assumed we're going to approve it, okay? And that's usually a good assumption. But part of the grumbling up here isn't over what's before us. It's actually not getting involved in it. And so I don't really know the way to improve that other than maybe to have updates, and in the case of our county administrator and board chair, people that put together our agenda, it could be that some updates along the way would allow commissioners to give their views. I mean, I have plenty of things I'd like to say about this, but at this, who said at this late date? Was it? Did you say that, or?
Yeah, I think I might have.
So that is a problem up here, and I don't know that there is a perfect solution to it. But I would say updating it and giving commissioners a chance to give their perspective as it's going along would be something to try. I'm going to vote for this because a lot of work went into it, and the bulk of the jobs are in the city of Eugene, and they're not in the county part. And I think it's good to respect the work of all the people that did the hard work to get to this point. So I'm going to vote yes. But on the other hand, I want to express some sympathy for the problem that we have on these multi-jurisdictional, and not even just multi-jurisdictional, just sometimes our own stuff, where an important decision is going to be made, and there's a big public involvement process, there's a scoping, there's public outreach, and then all of a sudden, at the end, oh, well, I had no idea that Jay and Pete had different views on something or whatever, you know. In this case, we have similar views.
Thank you. And I see no further discussion. I will say that that's not an exclusive problem with the with the Lane County Commission. The City Council has it. Commissioner Sorensen, when you and I were in the legislature, you're called on for votes on the Senate floor, and you don't even know what you're voting on sometimes. Now, I'm not going to say that about you, but certainly some people up there were that way, it would seem. So you know, that is the nature of committee work, and that is the nature of the policymaking body making a decision based upon committee work. And I will take a little bit of responsibility for not providing updates personally. And you know, maybe that's something that we as representatives on committees and on other boards, maybe we have that responsibility to bring those reports back. So that being said, we have before us, once again, 1711-0702, and I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Souza. Thank you, Sarah. Good work. And thank you, former Commissioner Faye Stewart, if you're out there.
He's too busy working.
Then we do have just a couple more items on our agenda. I think we'll be able to get through this morning because we have added a 2:30 time certain executive session, and we have a little over an hour's worth of work on, beginning at 1:30. So we'll move forward with the next item on the agenda, which is Order 17110703 in the matter of approving health insurance and cost of living adjustments for non-represented employees. And Ms. Mokrahisi, subsequent to this, we have Commissioner's business, and I believe we will push forward with that. So today, then, we have Ms. Wood and Ms. Mokrahisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll introduce the folks at the table here with me. Inga Wood, our Interim Human Resources Director and Labor Relations Manager. Kristen Mayfair, our Labor Relations Program Specialist. Mary Miller, our Wellness and Benefits Manager, and Christine Moody, our Budget Manager. I have a few comments I'll just share with you related to background and history of this item. First of all, on October 31st, 2017, just last week, the Board of Commissioners requested county staff prepare an action related to health insurance and cost of living adjustments for non-represented employees that would be consistent with the most recent agreements reached with the county's 7 bargaining units. In 2012, the county changed the health insurance benefit for non-represented employees from a choice between a traditional plan and a managed care plan to a choice between a copay plan and a high deductible plan with a health savings account. Then on September 22nd, 2015, this is related to health insurance, the Board of Commissioners approved changes to health insurance plans for non-represented employees hired after January 1, 2016. That was part of a voluntary separation incentive plan that was also negotiated with 2 public works unions. The changes included eliminating the costly copay plan, replacing it with the lower cost plan called the Prime Plus plan, and eliminating the monthly employee premium payments. These changes were intended to reduce overall health insurance costs for future non-represented employees. So you've heard some discussion about whether or not non-represented employees contribute currently to their health insurance. The answer is some do and some don't. There are a number of non-represented employees that do and that have been for the better part of over a year and a half contributing towards their health insurance plans, and they actually are contributing more than all of the bargaining units members are. And again, that was put in place in effective January 1, 2016. So this action today that the board will consider is momentous in one particular way, in that it would mean that all employee groups will now be contributing towards their health insurance for Lane County. This has been a stated goal for the county for several years. It's taken some time to get there because we have 7 bargaining units. And this is the last action item that will bring that forward. And I want to make a comment just about the health insurance piece, that this has never been about the amount of money employees contribute to the plans. That's why we've made it anywhere from $0 up to a maximum of $50 per month, which when you compare it to most other public entities and private companies is still significantly less than what others are contributing, and that's after the once a year free health screening that waives $20. if we were really, attempting to balance our budget through employee contributions to health insurance, we would implement much greater premium shares for employees. The goal is to have all of our employees have some skin in the game as it relates to health insurance, that we're really shifting our mentality and how we provide health care for our employees, from the idea of it just being a plastic card that we take to the doctor when we're sick, and it really being something that everyone is taking some ownership for and participating in actively. So that's the philosophy and the goal behind the premium share, and it goes in line with our shift from a fully funded health plan to a self-funded plan, the opening of our wellness clinic that happened in February of 2016, right, Mary? And then this discussion of premium shares. So I want to again reiterate, I know we talk about this a lot, but I want to reiterate for context what's driving this action. Also, Mr. Chair, as it relates to cost of living adjustments for approximately 6 years, from 2009 through 2014, non-represented employees received no cost of living or other range adjustments. During that same period, represented employees received an average of adjustment of approximately 1.65% in cost of living adjustments per year. On September 20th, 2013, Fox Lawson completed a salary study for non-represented employees, and no action was taken at that time. On December 9th, 2014, the board approved a 1.5% cost of living adjustment. So that was the first in 5 years for non-represented employees. That was effective January of 2015. First in 6 years, I should say. This was the first adjustment for non-represented salary ranges since 2008. I apologize, that's 7 years, from 2008 to 2015. On that same date, the board instructed Human Resources to further evaluate non-represented salary ranges and recommend appropriate adjustments to ranges in 2015. And then in October of 2015, the Board of Commissioners approved compensation adjustments based on a study completed by Gallagher Benefit Services, Fox Lawson Group. Those changes were effective January 1, 2016, and employees moved to the closest step without a decrease in pay, which resulted in an average salary increase of approximately 3.43%. So I will just say, while there was reporting in the paper a few years ago, and then you heard comments over the last several weeks about non-represented employees receiving a 20% increase, there were no non-represented employees that received a 20% increase. There was a handful of positions that where their ranges were adjusted up to 14%, but no individual received that increase. They had to earn their annual merit, which was approximately anywhere from 4 to 5% per year. So that's an important point, because I know there's been a lot of rhetoric around that topic, and we want to make sure that we lead with facts on the table. So since 2016, the county has negotiated and settled contracts with its 7 bargaining units. Those contracts are each 3 years in length and have included a change to health plans, the start of employee health plan contributions, and cost of living adjustments in each of the 3 years. The majority of the contracts have also included targeted market adjustments based on market review using total compensation. On October 31st, just last week, again, the board requested that we bring this item forward. And so this request is based on the goal, again, of moving all employees to health insurance plans that are consistent with the represented bargaining agreements, and moving all employees to a premium cost share for health insurance. It's also based on providing compensation changes for non-represented employees similar to the changes that we've made with represented groups in order to remain competitive in the market. So with that history, I'll turn it over to Inga Wood to talk about the item that's on the table today.
Thank you, Chair Farr and Commissioners. So what you have before you, I'll just give you a little bit of history of what we've done. Human Resources completed a comprehensive market analysis of 31 non-represented classifications this past year in 2017. The findings from this review show that 60% of the classifications are significantly misaligned at the low end of the wage scales, while only 4% are significantly misaligned at the top end. And we're really not surprised by those results. We're seeing that as our comparator wage scales are more compacted. They start at a higher wage and have less percentage change between the steps than we do here at the county. So we really weren't surprised by that study. To remain competitive in the market and continue our focus on wellness, the board's being asked to consider the following. On January 1st, 2018, the following employee monthly contributions for health insurance will change for all non-represented employees hired on or after January 1st, 2016, based on plan enrollment. So for employees on the high deductible health plan, the employee's monthly contribution will be $20 for employee only and also $20 for employee plus others. So $20 no matter which tier you would be in that plan. For employees on the Prime Plus plan, the employee's monthly contribution would be $30 for employee only and $50 for employee plus other, which is children, spouse, domestic partner, or family for the Prime Plus plan. And then before you, what we have in the packet is that effective on July 1st, 2018, the following employee monthly contributions for health insurance will begin for all non-represented employees hired on or before December 31st, 2015, based on plan enrollment. So for employees, again, in the high deductible health plan, the employee's monthly contribution for employee only or employee plus other would be $20 per month. For employees on the Prime Plus plan, the employee's monthly contribution would be $30 for employee only or $50 for employee plus other. For the copay plan, the employee's monthly contribution will be $50 for employee only and $70 for employee plus other. And then also effective January 1st, 2018, for employees who choose that copay plan, the professional services copay amount will increase from $25 to $35. So those office visits for the employees that choose that copay would increase by that $10, which is consistent with what we've done with the represented groups. All employees, all the non-represented employees who complete 3 parts of the annual Live Well Health Risk Assessment will receive a monthly credit of $20 towards their employee's health contribution cost. So as Steve said, you could essentially, if you choose the high deductible plan and do the health risk assessment, it would still be a free plan, but getting people in and getting their numbers to see that health risk assessment is really important. This would then put all employee groups at the county contributing to county contributions towards their health insurance. Also recommended in this proposal is a 2% cost of living adjustment effective January 1st, 2018, a 2% cost of living adjustment effective January 1st, 2019, and a 2% cost of living adjustment January 1st, 2020. This would be to address market competitiveness. Also in the packet, we're recommending that you ask HR direction for us to conduct a market study in early 2018 to review those classifications that I mentioned that were significantly misaligned in the 2017 study. This review will also provide recommendations to address the lower end of those salary ranges, and recommendations from this study would come back before the board if it's determined that an adjustment to the ranges is needed. There are currently 236 non-represented employees, that's excluding the physicians. The additional budget impact of the proposal over a 3-year period is estimated at $2.3 million for all funds. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Questions from the board? Commissioner Bozievich.
So just want to be clear, we approved the major market adjustments for non-reps in October 2015. They were effective January 1st, 2016. And prior to that, they'd had the 1.5% COLA January 1st, 2015, and then nothing and prior to that until 2008. What happened January 1st, 2017 for the non-reps as far as COLAs or market adjustments?
There's been no adjustments, no COLAs, no market adjustments.
So what we're proposing is the first COLA in 2 years in this, if we approve this board order.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. It seems a reasonable, I can't tell you how much I support us getting all common and contributing on our health insurance premiums. It'll be great to have every employee, including the elected officials here at Lane County, involved in that. I will note, though, that the COLA portion of these board orders does not apply to elected officials. Changes to elected officials' compensation can only be done every 2 years through the elected officials' compensation committee, advisory committee, and we all know what that process is. So just so folks understand, we're actually, the only thing that's happening for us elected officials under this is we will end up contributing a portion of our health insurance premiums, unless we're on the high deductible and do the health screening. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate the idea of keeping our non-represented employees equitable with the all the bargain units. It seems like we've always asked the non-reps to go first, and because we have the ability just to implement those changes, that's been the case. And in fact, in some, through the recession and our budgetary problems, we actually held you guys back when represented employees were still making, still getting COLAs and still making advances in salary ranges. So I appreciate the sacrifices our non-representative employees have made over the years. And I really think that this kind of lays out a plan to get everybody on an equitable footing here in Lane County and keeping all our employees competitive with the marketplace, because all of our employees are important. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blazevich. Further discussion? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate, appreciate the report and the work that you have done. I feel it necessary to advocate for a great number of Lane County citizens who are senior citizens that receive Medicare. If they also enjoy receiving Social Security, they pay $124 a month subtracted from their Social Security for Medicare. So I think that's a significant thing, that when we're talking about pays, co-pays, those types of things, that we also need to be mindful of those people that live in a different setting, and our elderly are challenged in many ways, and $124 a month is a pretty significant contribution to their Medicare health plan. In addition, they have to buy supplemental insurances as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know it's maybe perhaps a little off topic, but I think it's important to bring that to light. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good points, Commissioner Williams. Further discussion to the item? Then I see no further discussion. I will say that thank you for bringing this forward. This brings us into consistency throughout all non-elected employees in the county, and other than physicians, which have a different situation occurring right now. So thank you for bringing everything into parity. It took a little while for us to get to this point, but after today, should this pass, then we can look up and say that represented, non-represented employees are being treated the same in terms of contributions and in terms of annual cost of living adjustments. So we'll move forward with this. We have orders 1711-0703 before us. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Blazevich.
So I'll move approval of the order.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Blazevich, seconded by Commissioner Lycan. Discussion to the motion. I see no discussion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That brings us up to the noon hour, Mr. Mokrahajski, with one single item on our agenda. Prior to noon, we have no need for executive session prior to noon. So the final item is Commissioner Business, Announcements, and Agenda Team Requests. Announcements, Commissioners. I see none. Agenda Team Requests, Commissioner Blazevich.
Thank you. As reported earlier, under a judge's order, we've had to not assign an initiative number and place on the ballot an initiative that has collected the requisite number of signatures because it failed to meet the separate vote requirements of a portion of ORS that the judge has asked us to apply. I would like to ask that for head nods to get a future agenda item, probably be a work session or discussion item where the county clerk and county counsel's office could work together on a forward-looking set of changes to county code to clarify when those reviews will take place and possibly move this kind of review up to the front end so people don't go through all of that trouble of collecting signatures to find out something doesn't qualify for the ballot and get this mess straightened out. I don't want to look backwards because I don't want anything that's already in the queue to run under a different, I don't want to. The set of rules when they first started should be the set of rules. So I would hope we can get support, maybe take a look at that. Whether it goes anywhere, we don't know, but I think a forward-looking change might be helpful for the future of the initiative process here in Lane County.
Good. Does that have clarity to the rest of the board? Ms. Mokryski, then I'll look for head nods. It looks like you have that, Commissioner Bozievich. So we'll add that to future agenda items. That concludes our business in that we don't have for the morning, and that we do not have need for executive session. We do have a 2:30 time certain executive session. We will return in regular session at 1:30. We are recessed.